Chapter 272. Freedom, Concealment, and Efficiency. Wandering in the dark, ignoring rules, consequences, and morality, they created a favorable situation for the country in the most effective way. This was the main purpose of any country's special warfare system. Each country had its own special warfare system, so there was the Dark World. As far as Jianghu state was concerned, the special warfare system was transcendent. But the root of this transcendent was the unfettered freedom of the special warfare system and their attitude of ignoring the law in many cases, rather than how powerful the special warfare system was. Unfettered freedom also meant chaos. No regime was willing to accept a privileged system that could be above the law and had a strong integrity. But a privileged system wandering in the dark, ignoring the law, but unable to speak the same voice, could find its own soil in any regime. Because chaos and freedom also meant that it was easy to control and contain. Therefore, for hundreds of years, the position of the special warfare system in Jianghu state had been very subtle. The person standing on the commanding heights of this system was called the national war god and had a high status, but the whole system was always in a state of containment. The most obvious point was that the special warfare system of Jianghu state, whether it was Kunlun City or the major special operations bureaus, no matter their rank or power, at least on the surface, these institutions were subordinate to the Ministry of State Security or the General Staff Headquarters of Jianghu State. The former was a government department, and the latter was a military department. Special warfare system? How could ordinary people know what it was? Under such circumstances, the national war god of Jianghu State indeed had a high status, but the war god and the entire special warfare system were always separated by the two sensitive departments of the government and the General Staff Headquarters, which belonged to the Ministry of State Security and the General Staff Headquarters respectively. This kind of thing seemed small, but the impact was crucial. At least it meant that once there were some disturbing changes in the special warfare system, the government and the military could almost intervene in the internal affairs of the special warfare system through these two departments at any time. Concentrating the so-called glory and brilliance on the war god alone, and the entire special warfare system acted under the containment of the government and the military. This was the so-called balance that lasted for many years in Jianghu state. But now Gu Xingyun saw an opportunity. Li Honghe reappeared in Jianghu and occupied Lonely Mountain. The high-level officials were silent. Li Tianlan came back from the dead and was still called the heavenly son of Jianghu state. The high-level officials were still silent. Who could have thought that after the silence, when many people could not react, Kunlun City would directly set off such a huge storm with the Wang family of Beihai? Special warfare departments were set up in different areas. With the Southeast Special Warfare Department, there would naturally be the Southwest, Northwest, and Northeast. The person in charge of the Special Warfare Department entered the decision-making committee, and the subordinate Special Operations Bureau entered the local standing committee. In this way, the Imperial God of War, the Special Warfare Department, and the Special Operations Bureau, who stood at the highest point, would be directly connected. Naturally, the Ministry of State Security and the General Staff Department would be squeezed out, and the entire special warfare system would have a much more powerful voice overnight. And this was just the beginning. The establishment of the Special Warfare Department directly made up for the tragic gap between the peak and the base of the special warfare system. With the emergence of these departments, logistics, personnel and other departments would also be improved. Once Gu Xingyun improved the entire special warfare system, his position in Jianghu state would become unshakable. This change was subtle and huge. At least for Li Tianlan's future, it could definitely be regarded as bad news. Kunlun City recognized his achievements in Changdao and his credits. But as soon as Gu Xingyun's suggestion came out, everything became meaningless. So what if he graduated early with 100,000 credits? Build my own force? It could be said to be a free force, but now it was under the direct leadership of Huading Special Operations Bureau, or, directly suppressed. Give up this opportunity to integrate into this system? Now the East Emperor Palace was organized at the divisional level. Even if it could be promoted 2 levels to the level of director, so what? Above the East Emperor Palace, there were institutions at the level of Deputy Governor, the Special Operations Bureau, the Special Warfare Department, and finally Kunlun City. Previously, the special warfare system was a mess. Being disorganized meant that it was easy for the higher-ups to manage, and it meant countless paths and opportunities for the grassroots. Especially for young people with strength and potential like Li Tianlan, the special warfare system that valued strength instead of qualifications was the fastest way for them to rise. But once Gu Xingyan improved the system, everything in the special warfare system would have rules. If Li Tianlan wanted to go up, he would have to overturn the whole system. How difficult was it? It was like an ordinary soldier trying to overthrow the minister of the army headquarters, or an ordinary civil servant trying to overthrow the prime minister of Jianghu state. It was not only difficult, but also a joke. Gu Xingyan's plan was to establish a perfect system for the special warfare system. Li Tianlan felt a little bitter in his heart. No matter how proud he was, it was impossible for him to think that such a move was only aimed at him and the Li family. He and the Li family were at best an opportunity. Gu Xingyan used it casually and united with the Wang family of Beihai to form the current situation. Suppressing the Li family? That was only part of it. But in the final analysis, Gu Xingyan wanted to enhance his strength. The Wang family of Beihai, who also didn't want the Li family to reappear, had no reason to refuse Gu Xingyan's proposal. Their main sphere of influence was originally concentrated in the southeast, Yuzhou, and Beihai province. No matter how great the changes in the special warfare system were, their strength would not be affected. On the contrary, the entire southeast group might gain a lot of benefits from this great change in game. Although the Prince group had a subtle relationship with the special warfare group in recent years, no matter how serious the differences between the two sides were, it was a private matter. In this case, they would definitely support Gu Xingyan. As for Sai City, if Gu Xingyan's plan really succeeded, Sai City would definitely be the minister of the Special Warfare Department in the northeast. Their sphere of influence was in the northeast, but it would also be firmly restricted in the northeast. The benefits brought by Tribulation's breakthrough to the Invincible Realm would be limited. As for the academics, the corners of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched slightly. Bai Qingxian, who was deep in thought, also frowned and said, "The attitude of the academy." Halfway through her sentence, she stopped talking. The academics were now cooperating with Li Tianlan and Sai City, and they were the current leading group. Their attitude was indeed crucial. But Bai Qingxian, as the most outstanding woman in the political circle of Jianghu state, naturally wouldn't think of things so simply. So as soon as she spoke, she fell silent again. Those who cooperated were called allies. There was a subtle difference between allies and their own people, but sometimes it could be said to be like heaven and earth. The academics, who were alone in the special warfare system, attached great importance to Li Tianlan's future and Sai City's present. But from their standpoint, especially after they saw the special warfare group and the Prince group gradually drifting apart in recent years, they should realize something. Perhaps a powerful but faintly restricted Li Tianlan and Sai City was in the best interest of the academics. The reason was simple. It was easy to control. After all, the academics had no grudge against Kunlun City. They only wanted benefits. Sai City was the benefit they wanted, and Li Tianlan was a pawn in the future plan of the academics to continue to expand benefits. Li Tianlan would struggle and resist in the face of difficulties. In the process of his struggle and resistance, the academics would give appropriate support and slowly control Li Tianlan completely. As for the North Group, another large group in Jianghu state, it had gradually declined in recent years. They weren't struggling at death's door, but on this matter, they certainly wouldn't have a clear attitude. They would abstain or just go with the flow. So there was only the giant group left. Li Tianlan looked at Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingxian and narrowed his eyes. Vaguely, he seemed to understand why they came over. Li Tianlan calmed down and said with a smile, "Was there any discussion at the meeting about whether my East Emperor Palace and I can graduate in advance?" Gu Xingyan meant to wait. "He acknowledged your meritorious service in Chengdao, but the Sky Academy has just started. In the next 3 years, anything can happen, and there may be others who can surpass your current credits. So he thinks it's better to let you graduate 3 years later." Dongqing Wudi frowned and said. Obviously, the previous high-level meeting was not pleasant for him. Li Tianlan nodded and was not surprised. Gu Xingyun delayed him for 3 years, which was the main means to deal with him. His plan was too big to be accomplished in one day. This was a change. Although it was the general trend, it also needed a little planning. 3 years seemed to be enough. Li Tianlan looked at the teacup on the tea table in silence. The tea in the teacup was smooth and crystal clear. His future path was gradually narrowing, but it didn't really become a dead end after all. There was still a chance. In an angle that Dongxing Wudi and Bai Qingxian couldn't see, he narrowed his eyes, firm and calm. "Thank you, General." He looked up at Dongxing Wudi and said in a sincere tone, "I see." Dongxing Wudi looked at Li Tianlan. From his eyes, Dongxing Wudi saw calmness and indifference, stubbornness and unyielding, but he didn't see confusion or sorrow. The corners of Dongxing Wudi's mouth moved, and his face became a little awkward and weird. At this moment, the heart of the iron-blooded general, who had fought on the battlefield and been stained with blood countless times, seemed to be extremely complicated. He was silent for a minute or two before he said with a bitter smile, "What's your plan for the future, Tianlan?" "There is still a chance." Li Tianlan looked at Dongxing Wudi with a smile. "There are still a few years. It doesn't matter if everything is settled. I will eventually re-enter the invincible realm. No one can stop what the Li family wants to do." His eyes seemed to be flowing with clear brilliance and shining brilliance. Gu Xingyun used the general trend to change the rules with his strength. Then he would tear the rules with his strength. All the suppression seemed desperate, but after all, it was because he was not strong enough. Li Tianlan really couldn't do anything about it. It was better to let it go than to be helpless. Let it go. When he was strong enough, he would take back everything that he had let go of. "I know what you mean." Dongxing Wudi took a deep look at Li Tianlan. "But you need help now. Sai City is limited to the northeast, and the academics have a subtle attitude. Only we can give you this help. Tianlan, come home with me. The old master has been talking about you recently. It's almost the Mid-Autumn Festival. Come back to Luojing with me. I'll pick up Senior Li and have a reunion dinner together. By the way, we can discuss your marriage with Rushi." He paused, looked at Li Tianlan, and said with deep eyes, "Kunlun City's action this time is really bold, but if you think about it carefully, it's just like that. Gu Xingyun can do nothing to you, but he can't do anything to me. The future of the special warfare system is difficult, so you come to the military to develop. After you and Rushi get married, the Dongqing clan will be yours, and the future giant group will also be yours. When you control the border control corps one day, you won't be afraid of Kunlun City." Zhongzhou State was full of rich and powerful families. The giant group, a large but relatively free group not limited to regions, was also a force that no one could ignore. If this force could fully support Li Tianlan could indeed directly enter the military. The Border Control Corps looked like a corps, but it was an elite army of nearly 600,000 soldiers, which was called a small military department. If Li Tianlan controlled the Border Control Corps, he could even face Kunlun City in the future without fear. "Thank you for your kindness, General." Li Tianlan looked at Dongqing Wudi with a solemn and serious expression. "But I have my own plan, Anne. Rushi is very good, but I don't plan to get married for the time being, so, you have a damn plan." Dongqing Wudi suddenly frowned and interrupted Li Tianlan. His tone was a little rough, and he seemed to be unable to control his emotions. "In the end, you just don't want to marry Rushi? Tianlan, don't be too capricious. What's wrong with Rushi? What's wrong with coming to the military to develop? What the hell are you thinking?" Li Tianlan's expression stiffened, and then he looked at Dongqing Wudi with a smile. His eyes were grateful, but he said no more. Going to the military to develop was indeed a good choice, but it was not the choice he wanted. Even if he could reach the top in the military in the future, so what? What the Li family lost was still in the hands of Gu Xingyun. The former glory and glory of the Li family were also trampled by Gu Xingyun. From the perspective of the highest level of Jianghu state, no one would allow the military and the special warfare system to have a life-and-death game in any case. Even if all these could be put down, don't forget who the current minister of the army headquarters was. General Qi Baizong, the director of the decision-making committee, and the nominal flag-bearer of the Special Warfare Group. If Dongqing Wudi left the Border Control Corps, he was most likely to take over Qi Baizong's position and become the real giant of Jianghu state. Because of this, the atmosphere between the Dongqing clan and the Special Warfare Group was very delicate. If Li Tianlan entered the Dongqing clan, it was tantamount to adding fuel to the delicate relationship between the two sides. In the military development, the other side also occupied the commanding heights. How could it be so smooth? Even if the Dongqing clan could withstand everything, Li Tianlan's action was tantamount to directly dragging the Dongqing clan into the battlefield between the Li family and Kunlun city. Li Tianlan was not in the invincible realm. He was nothing now. He had nothing. He, who had to start from scratch, really couldn't afford the past of the Li family and the future of the Dongqing clan. Most importantly, on the day he went to Huading from Lin and then got out of the Audi after saying goodbye to military counselor, Li Tianlan had already made up his mind that his life didn't need anyone to arrange it. Grandpa couldn't, the Dongqing clan couldn't, and she couldn't either. This was his pride, or perhaps it could be said that this was his obsession. Tianlan and Rushi are indeed a little young. It's reasonable to postpone the marriage. Bai Qingxian suddenly said. She looked at Li Tianlan and smiled very gently. If you don't want to go to the Dongqing clan, then don't. Tianlan, how about going home with me on the Mid-Autumn Festival? Li Tianlan was a little stunned. The home Bai Qingxian mentioned was naturally not the Dongqing clan, but the Bai family of Yuzhou. The Bai family of Yuzhou, whose status in the giant group of Jianghu state was no less than that of the Dongqing clan. Li Tianlan's mind was a little confused. He never expected that when he made it clear that he didn't want to think about marriage for the time being, this mother-in-law would take him back to the Bai family. This, Li Tianlan finally couldn't help but smile bitterly. Aunt Bai, it's really not convenient these days. If I have time in the future, I will definitely visit you. Bai Qingxian was silent for a while, then nodded slightly and said elegantly, okay. She didn't say more, just quietly looked at Li Tianlan, her eyes soft. It wasn't that she didn't want to say it, but that she couldn't. Bai Qingxian's eyes trembled a little. Li Tianlan subconsciously avoided her eyes and handed a box beside the sofa to Dongqing Wudi. General, this is what my grandfather asked me to give to the Dongqing clan. Dongqing Wudi took the box. He seemed to know what was in the box, so he just nodded and said, at present, the family is making a new weapon for you. It will take about 2 or 3 years. You can get it then. Li Tianlan nodded absent-mindedly. You really don't want to go back with me? Dongqing Wudi asked again unwillingly. Li Tianlan shook his head with a smile. Dongqing Wudi hesitated and finally sighed with a bitter smile. Forget it, then I'll go back. Tianlan, if there's anything, call me at any time. As long as the Dongqing clan can do it, we will spare no effort. The weight of these words was extremely heavy. Li Tianlan had to stand up, bowed slightly and said, Thank you, General. You're welcome. Dongqing Wudi helped Li Tianlan up, his eyes complicated. We're a family, we don't need these things. This is it's guilt. Bai Qingxian suddenly said. She looked at Dongqing Wudi with resentment and indifference in her eyes. Li Tianlan was stunned and didn't understand. Bai Qingxian took a deep breath, handed a business card to Li Tianlan, and said softly, If there's anything, you can also call me. What the Dongqing clan can do, the Bai clan can do. Thank you, Secretary Bai. Li Tianlan took it solemnly. Bai Qingxian took a deep look at him, turned and went straight to the door. Li Tianlan saw the couple, who seemed to have a subtle relationship, out of the door. The young woman who had been guarding outside the door quietly stopped Li Tianlan and let Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingxian walk in front. Tianlan, I'm Tan Mengyao, secretary buys secretary. This is my business card. The secretary smiled softly. Please take care of me in the future. Li Tianlan took the business card, shook hands with the secretary, and said hello. His eyes involuntarily fell on Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingxian. The couple walked side by side, but they maintained a clear distance from each other. Where are you going? Dongqing Wudi walked beside his wife and asked in a complicated tone. The airport. Bai Qingxian's tone was indifferent. I'll see you off. Dongqing Wudi said subconsciously. No need. Bai Qingxian shook her head. She looked at Dongqing Wudi and said in a stiff tone, if there's nothing else, goodbye. She pulled away from her husband and went straight to the gate. Dongqing Wudi stood where he was and looked at his wife's back. After a long time, he reached out and touched his face. He still remembered that when the news of Li Tianlan's death came back from East Island, Bai Qingxian slapped him hard in the face. How was that a slap? That was a woman's most powerless sorrow and despair. Dongqing Wudi's eyes were bitter. He took a deep breath and walked slowly to the door. Under Li Tianlan's gaze, the couple, who used to be very close, parted at the gate of East Emperor Palace. They went to the same destination. But they went in a completely different direction. Both different. Chapter 273. The Mid-Autumn Festival was approaching. The East Emperor Palace, which was deserted on weekdays, became even more deserted. When Li Tianlan opened his eyes, it was already dark outside the window. It was quiet all around. There was a lamp in the corner of the room. Under the dim light, the golden retriever with soft hair was lying there quietly, wagging its tail in boredom. Li Tianlan sat up from the bed and rubbed his aching head. He picked up the glass of water next to him and drank it all in one gulp. He still felt a little thirsty. He shook his head and was in a trance. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. Soft footsteps sounded outside the door. Wang Yuetong pushed open the half-closed door and walked in. Looking at Li Tianlan, who was a little dull, she was stunned and then said softly, "You're awake? Do you want some water?" Li Tianlan glanced at Wang Yuetong dully and laughed at himself. "I drank too much." "Have they all left?" "Yes." Wang Yuetong didn't turn on the light. She just silently adjusted the lamp in the corner. She handed a glass of water to Li Tianlan and said softly, "Li Beidian and Yi Huayu left with Su Chu in the afternoon. You were still awake when Du Hanin left. Xiansheng and the others just left." Li Tianlan took a sip of water and nodded without saying anything. Tomorrow was the Mid-Autumn Festival. There was no holiday in the Sky Academy, but several young people in the East Emperor Palace were qualified to celebrate the festival. Li Beidian and Yi Huayu returned to Mount Shu. Su Chu went to the Bai family in Yuzhou. Du Hanin was originally homeless, but after the mutation of her wind vein and the recovery of her strength, the improvement of her strength had overwhelmed everything else in her heart. She didn't need to celebrate the festival, so she went directly to the Sky Academy to continue her classes. Ning Qianxing had planned to stay, but in the morning he received a call from Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations, asking him to go back for the festival. Ning Qianxing didn't want to go, but Yu Donglai said it was good to go and have a look. Now the relationship between Yu Qingyan and Ning Qianxing had completely stabilized. The old man thought it was good to confirm their relationship first, so he took Yu Qingyan and went directly to Jinling, Wuyue. Before leaving, Li Beidian said he wanted a small gathering. As a result, he and Ning Qianxing forced Li Tianlan to drink nearly 3 bottles of liquor. His strength was at its lowest point, so he vomited again and again. When he woke up, the day before the Mid-Autumn Festival was almost over. Those 2 bastards. Li Tianlan scolded him with a smile. It was just the Mid-Autumn Festival. 2 or 3 days were not even a farewell. It was really an injustice to drink the wine. "I made soup. I learned it from old you. Do you want to have a bowl?" Wang Yuetong asked softly. "I'm not hungry." Li Tianlan shook his head and looked at Wang Yuetong. Only then did he realize that the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai seemed to be very different from before. She seemed to have just taken a bath because her hair was still a little wet. She was wearing a white one-piece fishtail skirt embroidered with golden lines, elegant and lively. Her white high-heeled shoes made her look taller and more slender. She put on light makeup and sprayed some perfume on her body. The misty and ambiguous fragrance constantly stimulated Li Tianlan's gradually recovering sense of smell. Under the dim yellow table lamp in the corner of the bedroom, Wang Yuetong stood in the light and shadow, enchanting and charming like an unreal dream. Very beautiful today. Li Tianlan looked at her and said, "Do you like it?" Wang Yuetong stared into Li Tianlan's eyes seriously. Her eyes were reserved but a little wild, containing a kind of power called courage. Li Tianlan fell silent. The silence turned into awkwardness as time went by. The light in the corner seemed to dim a little. Wang Yuetong's pretty face was a little pale, and the dazzling brilliance on her body was gradually fading. "I'm going out for a walk." Li Tianlan stood up and said in a calm tone. "I'll go with you." Wang Yuetong walked over with no room for refusal and held Li Tianlan's arm tightly. There were thousands of kinds of delicate fragrance in the world. But this kind of natural body fragrance that even perfume could not cover was the most unique. The two snuggled together and walked downstairs in silence. The artificial lake in front of the East Emperor Palace was still flowing. The moonlight on the eve of the Mid-Autumn Festival was beautiful and bright. The night wind blew the fallen leaves high into the sky and shuttled back and forth in the moonlight. The strong sense of autumn permeated the night, and it was bleak. The man and woman walked together in the East Emperor Palace. They were followed by a golden retriever. They walked very gently, and the scene was also very gentle. "It's so nice." Wang Yuetong, who had been silent, suddenly said softly, "I like this feeling very much. It's like there are only two of us left in the world. We don't have to think about anything. It's so nice. Anything that isn't realistic is good." Li Tianlan said calmly. His voice was very calm, which was the opposite of Wang Yuetong's trance. Wang Yuetong held Li Tianlan's arm more tightly. She looked up at Li Tianlan with her small face and suddenly laughed. Under the poignant moonlight, her smile was very sweet and helpless. "So senior brother wants to tell me that the reason why you're so good in my eyes is that we're not realistic, right?" Li Tianlan frowned very quickly and did not say anything. Wang Yuetong's eyes gradually became crystal clear, and the uneasiness that had been suppressed in her heart for many days continued to accumulate in her tone. Her voice was a little trembling. "There will be no future between us, right?" The crystal in her eyes fell down and turned into teardrops. The tears streaked across the air for a moment and soaked into the grass after being penetrated by the moonlight. Li Tianlan was still silent. His expression was hard and a little cold. "In fact, I've known it for a long time. Ever since I found out about your identity, ever since you met my father, I knew that there would be no future between us. That's why I call Qin Weibai's sister, and I don't mind your engagement with Dongqing Rushi. Because there is no future, it's not something I should fight for. I've always thought that it's enough to have you once." In the bleak and cold night, the girl's voice choked intermittently. "But I'm still greedy. Senior brother, I like you very much, and I want to be with you all the time, even if I have to call her sister in the future. Senior brother, can you help me?" "I can't help you." Li Tianlan was silent for a long time before he said softly. Today, he also wanted to give Wang Yuetong the future she wanted, but he couldn't afford it. If he was responsible for Wang Yuetong's future, how could he be responsible for the Li family in the future? He used to be naive. But the cruel reality of the Battle of Chengdao told him that maybe it was a mistake for them to meet at the beginning. "I know." Wang Yuetong choked and said softly, "You won't join the Wang family of Beihai, will you?" With Li Tianlan's reputation in the dark world today, as long as he was willing to join the Wang family of Beihai, then everything would not be a problem, and the Wang family of Beihai would be willing to let Wang Yuetong stay with Li Tianlan. Now, except for Kunlun City, perhaps no force would refuse to tie Li Tianlan to their chariot. But Li Tianlan couldn't join the Wang family of Beihai. After all, the Wang family of Beihai let the Li family down. For the Li family, their inaction at that time was a betrayal. Join the Wang family of Beihai? How would the Li family live in the future? Maybe there would be no Li family at all. Without the Li family, there would be no conflict between him and the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. Maybe the betrayal could be understood by everyone, including him. But the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai, after all, had different paths. People with different paths could not make plans together. I won't. Li Tianlan finally said, short and firm. This was the irreconcilable knot between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai. He had reasons not to compromise, even though he knew what the association would lose. He continued to walk forward. Wang Yuetong stood where she was. Li Tianlan turned around and looked at her. Wang Yuetong looked at him. After a long time, she reached out and hugged Li Tianlan's waist tightly. Her whole body was almost attached to him. Senior brother, Wang Yuetong's voice trembled as if she was sleep-talking. Take me. Take me tonight. I'll do whatever you want tonight. Here, back to the room, in the water or on the roof. You're the first man I fell in love with. I don't want to leave myself with regrets. Take me. Li Tianlan's body was stiff. Wang Yuetong's delicate body trembled in his arms. He could almost clearly feel her tenderness and passion. If he couldn't have your future, he would want a past that he had. He didn't ask for everlasting love, but just wanted to have it once. That was roughly what it meant. But, Li Tianlan's mouth curved into a bitter smile. He looked at Wang Yuetong and whispered, it doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense whether he got it or not. Because in the end, he would regret it. Regret didn't lie in whether he got it or not, but in his position. Opposing positions would only lead to resentment and hatred, even if they had loved each other. Wang Yuetong shook her head desperately in Li Tianlan's arms. She held him tighter and tighter. I don't care. She cried unwillingly and aggrievedly. Walk with me. The scenery tonight is beautiful. Li Tianlan whispered. If one didn't look at the world from the highest point of martial arts, the night before the Mid-Autumn Festival was indeed beautiful. It was beautiful even in nothingness. Let's go back. Wang Yuetong raised her head in Li Tianlan's arms, looked into his eyes, and insisted, go back to the room. Senior brother, don't you like me? I don't believe you don't want me. I want you. Li Tianlan walked forward persistently and said blandly, but I want you not to hate me so much in the future. Wang Yuetong bit her red lip and held Li Tianlan's arms tightly. The two moved forward slowly in the night. They gradually approached the gate. Senior brother, Wang Yuetong's faint voice sounded, if you really become strong enough to ignore everything in the future, will you come to me? Li Tianlan quietly glanced at Wang Yuetong. He wanted to tell her that in this world, no one could be strong enough to ignore everything. He couldn't, Wang Tianzong couldn't, even the ancestors of the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family couldn't. Because ignoring everything was not strong. Wang Yuetong's eyes were soft but firm. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. He took a deep breath, turned his head, and said coldly, no. The two gradually approached the gate. Wang Yuetong grabbed Li Tianlan's arm and forced a smile. What a cruel man. Li Tianlan didn't say anything. In his sight, two high-end security guards, one fat and one thin, were on duty. Outside the door, a black car stopped at the entrance. Two men got out of the car. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. At this moment, he finally knew why Wang Yuetong was so abnormal today. Wang Yuetong also saw the two men outside the door. Her pretty face suddenly turned pale, and she even had no strength to hold Li Tianlan's arm. Both sides found each other inside and outside the door. Li Tianlan only knew one of the two men, but one was enough. Because it was Wang Tianzong. At a distance of tens of meters, the four people looked at each other. Li Tianlan sighed softly. He let go of Wang Yuetong and said indifferently, "Go." Wang Yuetong bit her lip hard and shook her head with tears streaming down her face. She knew very well what this meant. It seemed to be only a distance of tens of meters. But this distance was called parting. It was also an enemy. Chapter 274. Li Tianlan finally stopped moving forward. Wang Yuetong stood beside him, holding his hand tightly and lowering her head. Tears fell down one by one and fell on his hand, feeling cool. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Tianzong calmly. Inside and outside the door. Behind him was the moonlight. The moonlight shone all over the East Emperor Palace. Under the dim light, it was a deep night. Behind Wang Tianzong was the road, and there were thousands of lights in the distance. Under the light, Li Tianlan could only see darkness. The sword intent constantly brewing in the darkness filled all his senses. Wang Tianzong appeared and disappeared in the sword intent, wandering between reality and illusion. He could not be locked on at all. Sometimes it was not a good thing to be able to see the essence of martial arts. At least now, looking at the darkness around Wang Tianzong, Li Tianlan could only feel the power. The power that he could not resist at all. His expression changed, and there was finally a trace of bitterness in his narrowed eyes. Out of instinct, he held Wang Yuetong's hand tightly. It was a pair of trembling hands that gradually became cold but still gentle. Li Tianlan could not be sure of his mood. Unwilling. 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 Maybe a little of both. But at least he could be sure of one thing. He did not like the feeling of being forcibly taken away what he cared about. His own. What he cared about. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and looked at Wang Tianzong in his sight, motionless. Dozens of meters inside and outside the door. 2 worlds, 2 roads, 2 directions, and 2 standpoints. Wang Tianzong's eyes were calm and almost indifferent. That was the look that did not take anything seriously. He nodded to Li Tianlan and walked to the gate. In the duty room, 2 security guards, one fat and one thin, had come out. They looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan waved his hand. The security guard opened the door. Wang Tianzong came in. Wang Yuetong took a step back subconsciously, as if she wanted to hide behind Li Tianlan. But then she realized that it was inappropriate. She moved forward weakly and whispered, "Dad." Wang Tianzong nodded and looked at Li Tianlan. His eyes were still careless, but his expression was very soft. "How is your body?" "It's all right," Li Tianlan said quietly. Beside him, Wang Yuetong let go of his hand, trembling slightly. She was so weak. That trace of tenderness gradually went away. Li Tianlan was wrapped in the cold moonlight. His heart gradually became cold, and even his tone became cold. "I'm surprised that you're still alive." Wang Tianzong's tone was very casual and calm. With his status, standing in front of Lin Xianyuan, it was already a great honor for him to speak. There was no need to hide anything at all. "Your current state looks a little interesting. It's just a new beginning." Li Tianlan shook his head. His current state was no longer a secret. At the very least, he could not hide it from giants like the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. Moreover, his strength was gone. What was the point of holding on? Wang Tianzong took a deep look at Li Tianlan and said calmly, "Start over." "Do you still have time?" Li Tianlan froze for a moment. Wang Tianzong's eyes were still soft and casual, but Li Tianlan saw a trace of indifference deep in his eyes. "I just came back from Lin and went to see Senior Li. The old man is in good spirits," he said. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed. He, who had always been expressionless, finally smiled. It was like a smile, but also like a sneer. "Life is long, and I still have a lot of time." He looked at Wang Tianzong and said word by word. He understood what Wang Tianzong meant. By mentioning his grandfather, Wang Tianzong was implying that his life and Li Honghe's life were linked. Li Honghe had recovered to his peak state when he was at the border. Now he was in good spirits, but his state was extremely poor. No one could tell how many years he could hold on, but it was certain that it would not be too long. At least it could not be long enough for Li Tianlan to enter the invincible realm again. When Li Honghe died, what could the remaining Li family and Li Tianlan, who had not entered the invincible realm, do? He had no time. Even if he was the young governor of Sai City. When the Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City, and the Prince Group stood together, they were the general trend of Zhongzhou State. Under this kind of alliance, Sai City was no longer a force worthy of their fear. Wang Tianzong nodded perfunctorily. I just talked to Zhuang Huayang on the phone. Yuetong will not go to the Sky Academy for classes in the future. She will go back to Beihai province. You are in Huading, and it is not suitable for her. Wang Tianzong said calmly. Li Tianlan nodded and said, oh, without any emotional fluctuations. He seemed to want to see Yuetong, but he held back and turned his head. You don't want to? Wang Tianzong suddenly asked. Yes. Li Tianlan answered without hesitation. You have another choice. Wang Tianzong said softly, join the Wang family of Beihai. As long as you are willing, I will let Yuetong marry you within a month. You can get the best resources and the strongest protection. Kunlun City is no longer a problem. When you enter the invincible realm in the future, you can even use the power of the Wang family of Beihai to take revenge on Gu Xingyun. I can even give you a position equal to Xing Shao in the Wang family of Beihai. As long as you are willing, you can get anything. Really? Li Tianlan laughed. His eyes seemed to hide needles, sharp and cold. If I want the Wang family of Beihai, can I get it? Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan in silence. The softness in his eyes gradually disappeared, and finally became the most thorough indifference. I have given you a chance. He looked at Li Tianlan and Wang Yuetong and said, you can't blame me. Wang Yuetong looked at Li Tianlan with tears in her eyes. Li Tianlan finally looked at her. He reached out and wiped away the tears on Wang Yuetong's face. He said calmly, goodbye. It seemed that he could get anything if he joined the Wang family of Beihai. But first, the Wang family of Beihai got him. With him, the Wang family of Beihai could take advantage of the situation to completely gather the remaining Li family, and even get Sai City and Samsara Palace. In the end, Li Tianlan seemed to get everything, but he got nothing. Only the Wang family of Beihai really got everything. Because the Wang family of Beihai could not be surnamed Li. So, they could only say goodbye. You refused me today, but you will not know what you refused. Wang Tianzong said calmly. He really felt a little pity and regret in his heart. Even if he could really be calm about Li Tianlan's appearance, how could the Wang family of Beihai and even the Southeast Group always keep absolute peace? The Li family fell from the peak to the dust at the fastest speed. The Southeast Group, which had always been supported by the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family, suddenly had an unprecedented crisis. The Wang family of Beihai turned the crisis into an opportunity and concentrated the greatest power in the group in the fastest time. During that time, it was no exaggeration to say that half of the Southeast Group belonged to the Li family. If the Wang family of Beihai was willing to take action, Li Honghe might have been able to get through that crisis. But in the end, the Wang family of Beihai remained silent. It silently watched Li Honghe leave the border and take away everything that belonged to the Li family. Nearly 20 years had passed. Everything in that year had been settled. Some of the backbone figures promoted by Li Honghe in the Southeast Group had basically retired. But hidden dangers were hidden dangers after all. The exposure of Li Tianlan's identity had already caused some small shocks in the Southeast Group. And with Li Tianlan's resurrection this time, the shocks were actually getting bigger and bigger. If Li Tianlan could join the Wang family of Beihai, everything would disappear completely. But unfortunately, it was really a pity. A so-called heavenly son who started over but still had ridiculous persistence was, in the final analysis, worthy of being called a pity. Li Tianlan's expression remained unchanged. He knew what he refused. He just refused to be a vassal of the Wang family of Beihai. He would not regret it. Who is this? He suddenly looked to the side of Wang Tianzong. A middle-aged man with an extraordinary bearing stood beside Wang Tianzong. He looked like he was in his 40s and could be described as elegant and good-looking. He was a standard middle-aged handsome man. The man's temperament was calm and low-key. He came here with Wang Tianzong but never spoke. Hearing Li Tianlan's question, the middle-aged man seemed to be stunned, and then he took the initiative to smile. I have nothing to do with His Majesty's trip. It's just on the way. He took out a business card, handed it to Li Tianlan, and said with a smile, I'm Lu Shuanghua. Hello, young Master Li, Lu Shuanghua. Jiangnan Dao. One of the intelligence giants in Jianghu state. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and took a serious look at Lu Shuanghua. Lu Shuanghua was also a legendary figure in the dark world of Jianghu state. He was originally an ordinary researcher belonging to the Prince Group. He did not know martial arts and was not a core member. He was hunted down by the Prince Group to kill him after he inadvertently learned some unknown secrets. However, he failed to kill him. Instead, he was saved by the young Wang Tianzong. Lu Shuanghua joined the Wang family of Beihai, took root in Jiangnan province, and established Jiangnan Dao in more than 10 years. An ordinary person without the strength to truss a chicken set up the largest intelligence organization in the south of Jianghu state in more than 10 years. Such an experience was indeed legendary. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. Hello. Li Tianlan reached out and shook hands with Lu Shuanghua without saying much. Let's go. Wang Tianzong glanced at Li Tianlan and suddenly turned around, planning to leave with Wang Yuetong. Wait a minute. Li Tianlan suddenly said. Wang Tianzong turned around. Li Tianlan looked into his eyes and said softly, before the Battle of Changdao, I took a bottle of potion called Surge. Surge, immortality potion, and against the way of heaven, the unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, were combined together to make me who I was in the last battle of Changdao. Does your Majesty know about this? I did it. Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan for a while and then said frankly, I asked Xingxiao to pass against the way of heaven to you on purpose. If you died in Changdao at that time, I would really feel at ease. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Li Tianlan. Why, do you want to take revenge on me? Li Tianlan looked at Wang Tianzong. After a long time. He smiled softly, bowed deeply to Wang Tianzong, and said calmly, I dare not. Wang Tianzong's pupils suddenly contracted. In an instant, there was a trace of irrepressible irritation and killing intent in his eyes. He looked at Li Tianlan, who still did not straighten up, twitched the corner of his mouth, turned around and said, let's go. Wang Tianzong took Wang Yuetong. Lu Shuanghua followed. Li Tianlan straightened up and looked at the backs of the three. No matter whether they were affectionate or not, no matter whether they cared or not, there was silence when they parted. There was only silence. 2 security guards stood quietly at the door, one fat and one thin, and they formed a beautiful contrast in the night. Wang Tianzong looked at the 2 seemingly ordinary security guards seriously and narrowed his eyes tightly. And behind him. Chapter 275. Without any resistance, Wang Tianzong easily took Wang Yuetong out of the gate of East Emperor Palace. Lu Shuanghua, the intelligence giant of Jianghu state, drove in person. In the slight shaking of the car, the light shone out, illuminating the roadside flower beds. Wang Yuetong stood in front of the opened car door and looked back. In her sight, Li Tianlan still stood there quietly, showing no expression. Wang Yuetong bit her red lips tightly to stop herself from crying. She just stared at the figure bathed in the moonlight inside the door. There were lights and the night wind behind her. The wind blew the autumn leaves high into the sky. Her long skirt and hair danced in the night light. There was a kind of reluctance and desolation similar to heartbreak. The man who was silent and quiet when she first met him. The man who was ruthless and decisive in the entrance maneuver. The man who stood in front of her in a dangerous situation and burned the sky with a sword. This was the man who had saved her, but insisted on being even with her back then. They didn't spend a long time together, but feelings were emotions that didn't need time to measure. Meeting, beginning, intimacy, until parting. It wasn't until this moment that Wang Yuetong clearly felt the importance of Li Tianlan in her heart. The importance that she couldn't give up. She had long been obsessed with the reassuring feeling of staying with him, even if she knew from the beginning that they would not have a future. But she didn't expect that this kind of relationship without a future would not end satisfactorily in the end. Wang Yuetong laughed with tears in her eyes, looking delicate and lovely. For the first time in her life, she was infatuated with him. This so-called first love was sweet and bitter indeed. Wang Yuetong waved her hand. The sparkling tears finally fell to the ground. Li Tianlan was motionless, only determined. The black car kept going away along the road and finally disappeared in the distance. His eyes couldn't reach her, and neither could his heart. Li Tianlan finally felt the loneliness that was almost empty. Even if he knew that Li Beidian and Ning Qianxing would come back soon. Qin Weibai had nothing to do with him anymore. Wang Yuetong returned to Beihai. Li Shi, who only lived for herself, had his grandfather standing in the front and supporting her, and it had nothing to do with him. Even his few friends all had their own forces behind them. Li Tianlan's foundation was ruined. Since he had lost his martial arts, he seemed to have lost his responsibilities. It was not until then that Li Tianlan realized that he had nothing in his life except for the responsibility on his back. He had nothing. Li Tianlan laughed bitterly. His figure became lonely in the night. It was a state of mind that could not be expressed in any words. Loneliness, desolation, helplessness, and confusion. He stood there, but he seemed to have lost his soul. As a result, he seemed to have disappeared into the cold night, becoming completely void and lifeless. At the entrance of the East Emperor Palace, the two security guards looked at each other with puzzled and solemn eyes. After all, they were not ordinary security guards, so they could feel Li Tianlan's almost silent state at this time. The two of them did not know whether this situation was good or bad, and for a moment, they were in a dilemma. Shall we go and take a look? The tall and thin security guard frowned. Although he was asking, his body had subconsciously walked toward Li Tianlan. The short and fat security guard hesitated for a moment before he followed in silence. Silently, Li Tianlan opened his eyes again. His vision became unprecedentedly clear and peaceful. Two security guards walked up to him. The three of them were stunned at the same time. The tall and thin security guard reacted very quickly, showing a simple and honest smile. He comforted him honestly. "Boss, would you like to drink some wine? The rice wine brewed by yourself won't go to your head." "I'm not your boss." Li Tianlan shook his head and quietly looked at the security guards in front of him. "What are your names?" "Li Dazhuang." The tall and thin security guard continued to be simple and honest. "Li Erwang." The slightly short fat man looked innocent. Even though Li Tianlan was in a very bad mood now, he was almost amused by these two brothers at this time. He shook his head, pointed to the duty room in front of the door, and walked in first. The duty room was relatively simple. There was a 20-inch color TV, two hard beds, a simple computer that was turned off at this time, and a brand new rack hung clothes and electric batons. A small table was placed in the center of the duty room. There was indeed a bottle of wine without a trademark and a stack of peanuts on the table. Li Tianlan glanced at them, shook his head, and said, "Sorry to trouble you." "Not at all. The salary here is high, the environment is good, and it's free." "It's good. Boss, don't mention it." "Sit down." Li Dazhuang greeted him warmly. He seemed to be a little flattered. "Don't pretend." Li Tianlan said indifferently, "High salary." I can't afford to pay the salary of 2 security guards in the thunder-shocking realm, even if I sell my blood. I feel wronged for you two staying here. He took a small stool and sat down. Looking at the two brothers with stiff expressions, he calmly said, "Which force are you from?" The 2 security guards looked at each other with confusion and embarrassment in their eyes, but they still tried to pretend to be at a loss. The Wang family of Beihai? The Jiang family of South America? Kunlun City? Sai City? Or? Li Tianlan didn't go on. But at this point, it was really meaningless to hide. The 2 security guards smiled bitterly and hesitated. The tall and thin security guard took the lead to bow and said softly, "Bamboo Forest pays respect to your highness. Volcano pays respect to your highness." The fat man also bowed respectfully. Li Tianlan was not surprised. Although he mentioned several forces, he had a general idea of their positions. Now his perception was absolutely terrifying to an unimaginable level. Although he could not specifically judge their strength, he could be sure that their strength was definitely around the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Such people stayed here for a few months without doing anything, even after he came back, so it was unlikely that they were enemies. He was now the young governor of Sai City. But they called him Your Highness. Li Tianlan laughed at himself and finally asked, "Are you from the Samsara Palace? How did Your Highness find out that there was something wrong with us?" asked the man with the code name Bamboo Forest. Obviously, he was the leader of the 2. He wore a security guard uniform and looked honest. He really didn't look like a master at all. But Li Tianlan could see through them at a glance, which was really incredible for them. If Wang Tianzong can see it, so can I. Even if he can't see it, I can perceive it. Li Tianlan said quietly, "Are you really from Samsara Palace?" Samsara Palace has withdrawn from Jianghu State. Bamboo Forest smiled and said, "This is something that everyone knows." He hesitated a little and finally said, "We belong to Saber." Saber? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows with a strange expression. "Is this an organization?" "Yes." Bamboo Forest's tone was calm. He seemed to see Li Tianlan's doubt. He whispered, "It's a very secretive organization. Military Counselor is our immediate superior." Military Counselor. After all, it was Samsara Palace. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and finally said, "I want to see Military Counselor." Beep! As soon as his voice fell, a car horn sounded at the door. Before the car stopped in his sight, Li Tianlan's eyes blurred. Military Counselor in a black cloak had appeared in front of him. Seeing the calm Bamboo Forest and volcano, Military Counselor immediately breathed a sigh of relief. But then he saw Li Tianlan. Military Counselor's body stiffened slightly. After a moment of silence, he finally said with a bitter smile, "I heard the news that Wang Tianzong came here, so I came to have a look." "It's okay. Your news is timely." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at Military Counselor. He was not being sarcastic. With Wang Tianzong's status, he could really do whatever he wanted in Jianghu State. Even if everyone wanted to pay attention to him, there must be very few people who could pay attention to his traces. But now Wang Tianzong left for less than 10 minutes, and Military Counselor could come here, which showed how terrifying the resources he had in his hands. "What is Saber?" Li Tianlan asked directly before Military Counselor could speak. He thought that Samsara Palace had nothing to do with him, but now he found that it was always around him. No matter what this news meant, it finally made him feel better when he was in such a bad mood. Military Counselor looked at the Bamboo Forest and volcano. The 2 bowed to him helplessly. Military Counselor suddenly understood what was going on, and he also smiled helplessly. He sat opposite Li Tianlan and ate a peanut. After a moment of silence, he pointed to the Bamboo Forest and volcano. "They are Saber." "Only 2 people?" Li Tianlan stared at Military Counselor. Even if he was a fool, he would not believe that there were only 2 people in the so-called Saber. Military Counselor shook his head and waved his hand. The bamboo forest and volcano left quietly, leaving the duty room to military counselor and Li Tianlan. Seeing this, Li Tianlan frowned slightly. Can't you trust your own people? This is the rule. Military counselor whispered, they don't know much. Strictly speaking, the bamboo forest and volcano only belong to the scabbard. They only know what they should know. If there was a scabbard, there would naturally be a blade. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed tightly. He suddenly found that the so-called saber might be powerful beyond his imagination. Is saber an organization? Li Tianlan asked. It's an organization. I've been managing it on behalf of the palace master over the years. Military counselor nodded. Is the headquarters in Huading? Li Tianlan continued to ask. At this moment, he wanted to take off military counselor's cloak and see who he was behind it. Headquarters? Military counselor repeated it silently, and then shook his head. No headquarters. Li Tianlan frowned. Saber is one, but also independent of each other. Military counselor whispered, the scabbard is heavy, the blade is sharp, the saber intent is ethereal, the hilt is illusory, and the saber light is bright. Such an organization doesn't need a headquarters for the time being. The bamboo forest and volcano belong to the scabbard. Even if the two were not at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, they were close to this realm. Then what were the so-called blade, saber intent, hilt, and saber light? Li Tianlan was a little frightened in his heart. But although we don't have a headquarters, our foundation is indeed in Jianghu state. Military counselor said with a smile, Your Highness, the Samsara Palace is famous overseas. The outside world says that we rise fast and have a weak foundation. But no matter how weak the foundation is, it still exists. Do you know where the real foundation of the Samsara Palace is? Li Tianlan did not speak. This answer would not surprise him at all. Although the answer itself was unexpected. Our real foundation is in Jianghu state. Chapter 276. For countless years, the dark pattern of Jianghu state had always been extremely stable. Jade Pool, Mount Shu, Azura Path, Great Soaring Temple, big and small forces all had their own romance. But the ones who really stood at the peak 20 years ago were the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family. In the past 2 decades, it was the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. Sai City stood aloof from the world. In terms of comprehensive strength and heritage, it was much worse than the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. Therefore, even though Sai City also had invincible realm experts and murderous weapons, in the eyes of the public, the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City were still in charge of the overall situation in Jianghu state. Jianghu state was a forbidden zone in the dark world. This was something that all the superpowers knew. The unfathomable Wang family of Beihai, the powerful Li family, and the slick Kunlun City, no matter who stood at the highest point of the special warfare system of Jianghu state, had an amazingly consistent attitude toward the outside world. That was rejection. Jianghu state refused any foreign superpowers to enter Jianghu state. For many years, although it was impossible for the superpowers to have no foundation in Jianghu state, they did not make any achievements. The Jiang family of South America had 3 invincible realm experts. How glorious was that? In Jianghu state, there were only a few temporary imperial residences similar to clubhouses, and they were even deserted all year round. This kind of unity against the outside world was an absolutely terrifying pressure for anyone. Because of this, Li Tianlan was so surprised when he heard military counselor's words. The real foundation of Samsara Palace was in Jianghu state. How did you hide from the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City? Li Tianlan looked into military counselor's eyes and asked seriously. Before, the Samsara Palace could be stable because Wang Tianzong and Gu Xingyun didn't pay much attention to it. Now that the Samsara Palace had shown great strength and was getting farther and farther away from Jianghu state, it was impossible for the other party to not take action. But in the end, their so-called action turned out to be just blocking Qin Weibai's pre-Qin international group. This showed that it was not that they didn't want to move, but they really didn't notice the changes in Jianghu state. Was the arrangement of the Samsara palace too flawless? Or could it be that this so-called foundation was actually so small that it couldn't be noticed? We don't have a headquarters. The military counselor's answer was simple and straightforward. Without the headquarters, there was no need to be afraid of others finding out. This sounded like a reason, but it also didn't seem like a reason. The existence of the saber has always been very hidden. The reason why no one has noticed it is actually because these resources have not been used for all these years. Everything is normal. Naturally, there will be no abnormalities. Military counselor looked at Li Tianlan. His face was hidden behind the cloak, and only a thin outline could be vaguely seen. On the surface, Samsara Palace has withdrawn from Jianghu state. At least in Jianghu state, we will not be the target of some people for the time being. Their target now is you. Li Tianlan remained silent. It's been quite lively here these past few days. 3 groups of people have come one after another. It seems that the fact that you're still alive has really stimulated some people, so much so that they can't sit still anymore. They all want to see your current state. Military counselor chuckled. His laughter echoed in the security room, and it was extremely cold. 12 fire-flaming realm experts and 1 thunder-shocking realm expert. It's really a big deal. If it weren't for fear of exposing their identities, it's possible that the experts at the peak of thunder-shocking realm or even a half-step invincible realm expert would come in person. Li Tianlan didn't know what would happen to those people. Bamboo forest and volcano were disguised as security guards. He didn't need to think to know what would happen to those people. He shook his head in self-mockery. What kind of people are they? Kunlun City? Or the Prince Group? Or the overseas forces? Why not the Wang family of Beihai? Military counselor asked in a playful tone. When this question was asked, Li Tianlan suddenly froze. In the past few days, he didn't know that someone had been sending people to test here. But now that he knew, he realized that he didn't doubt the Wang family of Beihai at all. It was just a feeling. This kind of thing didn't seem to be done by Wang Tianzong at all. Li Tianlan didn't know much about Wang Tianzong. But every time he met him, he could clearly feel the kind of boldness, great talent, bold strategy, and indifferent like the mountains and the sea. Such a man didn't need to send cannon fodder to test this kind of means. Li Tianlan felt that the other party would definitely send someone to ask what he wanted to know. It was above board, just like how he took Wang Yuetong away tonight. It was simply irresistible. The Wang family of Beihai did let the Li family down. Li Tianlan actually didn't hate Wang Tianzong. Even if the combination of Surge Potion, Immortality Potion, and Against the Way of Heaven was a conspiracy, it didn't matter whether he knew the so-called conspiracy in advance or not. In the situation of Changdao at that time, he had no way out. Why would he care about these things? It was actually ridiculous. Although the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai were now on opposite sides, Li Tianlan didn't think that Wang Tianzong was a bad person. But he had his goal. And he had something that he had to get back. Different ways. That was all. The Wang family of Beihai wouldn't do such a thing. Li Tianlan said. In his mind, the Wang family of Beihai and Wang Tianzong were the kind of force and opponent that deserved respect even if they were enemies. Just like the Li family many years ago, they were upright. Even if they didn't get along, from an objective point of view, it was hard to say what was wrong with them. I agree with you. Military counselor smiled. But I don't know who the other party is. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, they are all dead. Senior Li is still here. In a short time, they dare not do anything to you. If I go to investigate, I can find out, but I will inevitably leave some clues. If there are too many clues, the existence of the saber will be exposed. At this stage, it's not worth the loss. Saber, Li Tianlan said silently and calmly, the scabbard, the blade, the hilt, the saber intent, the saber light. The saber is one. What about you? Which part are you? I am the hand holding the saber. Military counselor's smile was unfathomable. Palace master is the real saber holder. Very mysterious. Li Tianlan said slowly, but what's the point of being afraid of exposing the mystery? It's not that I'm afraid of being exposed. It's just that the time is not ripe. Your Highness, you are likely to be the next saber holder, but it's not the right time for me to tell you everything. The existence of the saber is too meticulous. A little clue may destroy the overall situation. And at this delicate time, the overall situation cannot be destroyed. Military counselor raised the wine glass in front of him and toasted Li Tianlan. His movements were very respectful and his words were very euphemistic, but the meaning was extremely obvious. Now Li Tianlan was not qualified to touch these things. Li Tianlan smiled. He was not angry, because it was the truth. What do you want? He looked at military counselor and asked. For the time being, military counselor smiled. His face was hidden in the darkness, but Li Tianlan could feel his clear eyes. Now, we just want to create a sky without shadows. A sky without shadows, Li Tianlan was thoughtful. He seemed to have guessed something and sighed softly. And then? Military counselor was silent for a long time, then shook his head and said, who knows if there will be anything that hasn't happened. Your Highness just needs to grow up patiently. If everything goes well, everything will probably become clear in 5 or 6 years. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and looked at military counselor. 5 or 6 years later. This year was the 4th year of the term of President Li Huaqing of Jianghu State. 5 or 6 years later, the most delicate, tense, and intense sensitive period of the general change in Jianghu State, Li Tianlan didn't know if he was thinking in the wrong direction. How is your Highness's state now? Military counselor interrupted Li Tianlan's thinking and asked seriously, do you still need external help? If. No need. Li Tianlan shook his head. I can only rely on myself now. If, military counselor hesitated. I heard that the Imperial Jade Seal is in your Highness's hands. If your Highness doesn't need it, maybe you can give it to Tribulation. There's a big problem with his breakthrough. If I'm not mistaken, although Tribulation has entered the invincible realm, his comprehensive combat capability is not even as good as mine. As far as I know, the Imperial Jade Seal is one of the best solutions. Li Tianlan was stunned and asked subconsciously, what's the problem? After he returned to East Emperor Palace, Tribulation had come twice. Li Tianlan could clearly feel that he was indeed in the invincible realm now. But after the breakthrough, he was still not as good as military counselor who was now a half-step invincible realm. Before the breakthrough, Tribulation was definitely stronger than military counselor. I don't know. Military counselor was a little vague. It should be that the breakthrough was too intense and the burden on his body was too great, so that he couldn't exert all his strength. Li Tianlan thought about the Imperial Jade Seal that was now in his room. Is that thing useful? Your Highness's resurrection is enough to explain everything. Military counselor said in an affirmative tone. Li Tianlan suddenly understood. His resurrection was because of luck. The Imperial Jade Seal of Jianghu State was definitely one of the most prosperous things. I see. Li Tianlan nodded and said, I will give the Imperial Jade Seal to Marshal Uncle. He suddenly looked at military counselor and said meaningfully, but I'm curious. How did you know that this thing is in my hands? Military counselor was silent. Behind the black cloak, he seemed to smile again. Li Tianlan didn't ask more. He took a sip of wine and said, is there anything else? Nothing. Military counselor said, Your Highness, what's your next plan? Start over. What else can I do? Li Tianlan laughed at himself. He suddenly thought of Qin Weibai who said it had nothing to do with him, Wang Yuetong who waved with tears when she just left, and Dongqing Rushi who was hard to distinguish between good and evil behind the red lovesickness. Li Tianlan's eyes were a little dim. It will be fine. Military counselor said softly, if your Highness is worried about the departure just now, you don't have to. I can assure your highness that the Wei Wang Yuetong was picked up today. She will be sent back in the future. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. The Wang family of Beihai is indeed very powerful. In my opinion, and even in the opinion of many people, the current Wang family of Beihai can even be said to be the #1 power in the dark world in terms of comprehensive strength. But a big tree has dry branches. The Wang family of Beihai has been developing for too many years. Their foundation is desperate, but there are already problems inside. Military counselor said with an indescribable emotion, Wang Tianzong is really talented and bold. Some problems inside the Wang family of Beihai have been suppressed by his own strength over the years. But it's better to let them out than to block them. Some problems have been suppressed for too long and will break out one day. Now it seems that day will not be too far away. Li Tianlan straightened up, and his eyes began to sparkle. There was a problem inside the Wang family of Beihai? And it was already to the point of breaking out? This news was definitely good news for the Li family today. How far is it not too far away? Li Tianlan asked in a deep voice. About 5 or 6 years later, unless Wang Tianzong has the ability to reach the sky, the Wang family of Beihai will only welcome the change with Zhongzhou state. Military counselor said indifferently. 5 or 6 years later. Another 5 or 6 years later. Li Tianlan's heart was full of ups and downs. He thought for a long time, then picked up the glass and drank up the wine in it. It's too far away to say this. He said, any opportunity requires strength. 5 or 6 years, there is still time. His eyes gradually became firm. He seemed to have made up his mind. Military counselor looked at him in confusion. I seem to know my way. Li Tianlan smiled. Since returning to East Emperor Palace, his eyes became completely peaceful for the first time. He was not lost, not irritable, not at a loss, not helpless. Only concentration was left. Even though it's hard. He stood up, nodded to military counselor, and walked directly out of the security room. Bamboo Grove and Volcano stood outside the door. Seeing Li Tianlan come out, they bowed subconsciously. Li Tianlan didn't say much. He came out of the security room and walked back to East Emperor Palace. His steps were slow, but they became more and more firm. The moonlight in the sky was still cold. It was past midnight. At this time. Today. It was the Mid-Autumn Festival. Li Tianlan walked into East Emperor Palace, which was as luxurious as a palace. Instead of going back to his room, he went to Yu Donglai's room. Yu Donglai's room was not locked. The room was dark. On the windowsill facing the window, there was a delicate small bottle. Li Tianlan smiled, walked over, and picked up the bottle. This was what Yu Donglai left him before he left. It was also what he hesitated to give to Li Tianlan in the end. It was also what helped Li Tianlan make up his mind. Li Tianlan looked at the bottle, his eyes persistent. There was no time for him to hesitate. He had to take this step after all. Li Tianlan opened the bottle cap. The room was full of fragrance. On the last night of the final battle of Changdao, he saw the real commanding heights of martial arts. He saw the real invincible road of the invincible realm, but he also saw his end at that time. He had wind and thunder veins. He had exquisite bone. His will was as firm as a rock. His inheritance was unparalleled in the world. But everything he had could not reach the end he saw. In this case, just like what he said in Changdao. It was better to give up. Li Tianlan pursed his lips tightly. In fact, Li Honghe had already told him the essence of martial arts, even though his grandfather did not see the end at that time. The so-called martial arts was not a realm or a constitution. It was only sword intent. Li Tianlan raised his hand and drank the fragrant potion in the bottle. The violent medicine suddenly broke out in his body, violently pulling every meridian in his body. It was the most violent destruction and destruction. Li Tianlan was expressionless. He held the bottle tightly, and his hands suddenly shook. The 2 meridians running through his limbs suddenly tightened to the limit in his body and suddenly broke. Puff! A mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth. His face was pale, and his breath suddenly became extremely weak. Wind and thunder veins. The wind and thunder veins that he was proud of were directly destroyed by him in the most violent way. Li Tianlan's breath was weak, but in the dark room, a sword intent began to take shape slowly. The sword intent seemed to exist in the whole room, but also seemed to spread to every corner of his body. Blood flowed down from Li Tianlan's legs and arms, dripping down his white clothes into the room. Li Tianlan looked at the dark sky outside the window. There was only concentration in his eyes. Chapter 277. The second day after the Mid-Autumn Festival. August 16th, Li Beidian and Yi Huayu went to Mount Shu as if they had made an appointment. Ning Qiansheng and Yu Qinyan went to Jinling. Su Chu went to Jade Pool. Du Hanin was still in the Sky Academy. Several young people from East Emperor Palace returned to East Emperor Palace almost at the same time. The weather was a little gloomy after the Mid-Autumn Festival. Thick clouds rolled and stirred in the sky. Li Tianlan was no longer in front of the clear artificial lake. Only the golden retriever was lying lazily in front of the lake, wagging its tail. Li Beidian frowned and went directly into the luxurious palace, which was mostly made of glass. He went straight to Li Tianlan's bedroom on the 3rd floor. Hurried footsteps echoed in the corridor. Li Beidian was the fastest. He was the first to reach the door of Li Tianlan's room. He reached out and was about to knock on the door when Li Tianlan, who had already heard the footsteps, opened the door. The moment their eyes met, both of them were stunned. So fast? Li Tianlan's tone was a little surprised. Looking at Li Beidian in front of him and Ning Qiansheng and Su Chu behind him, he frowned and said, "Didn't you say you would come back the day after tomorrow?" Li Beidian's gloomy expression gradually melted. He heaved a sigh of relief and said softly, "Are you all right? What's wrong?" Li Tianlan turned sideways to let everyone in and said casually, "What can happen to me?" Li Beidian hesitated. "It's good that you're okay." Ning Qiansheng looked at Li Tianlan's face and said calmly, "Has Yuetong left?" Li Tianlan glanced at him and nodded. "She was taken away by her father the day you left." "We already know. Now everyone knows that you can't be reached by phone, so we rushed back." Ning Qiansheng took a deep breath and said with a smile, "It's good that you're okay. Well, with the reputation of the Wang family of Beihai, they won't take this opportunity to embarrass you." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly. It was not until then that he found that everyone's expression was a little dignified, except for the initial worry and gloom. "Everyone knows?" Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Yu Donglai, who was standing behind several young people, suddenly sighed, walked to the side, and sat down silently. Du Hanin's expression was calm. Yi Huayu and Yu Qinyan were at a loss. Li Beidian's eyes were cold. Ning Qiansheng just smiled bitterly and nodded. "Everyone knows." He especially emphasized the word everyone, as if he wanted to show how broad the scope of this word was. "Oh," Li Tianlan said expressionlessly. However, there was a hint of ridicule in his eyes. Everyone answered Li Tianlan's question 2 days ago. That was the appearance of Wang Tianzong on the night before the Mid-Autumn Festival. The number 1 on the divine list and the dignified Sword Emperor, no matter how much he valued Ding Hao, would not come all the way here to say a few words to him. As for picking up Wang Yuetong, it was not necessary for him to come in person. Now the power of the Wang family of Beihai in Huading was gradually recovering. Lu Shuanghua of Jiangnan Society, Yi Fengcheng, the director of Huading Special Operations Bureau, Wang Xiaoyao, the Zhang family, and even Yu Chuanguang, the mayor of Huading, Li Tianlan could not stop them from taking Wang Yuetong away. Wang Yuetong did not have the courage to resist the whole family, and she was not in danger. In any case, Wang Tianzong coming in person seemed redundant. But for someone like him, how could his every move really be superfluous? That day, he went to see his grandfather and came to see Ding Hao. It turned out that it was not on the way. He took Wang Yuetong away. That was a signal. It was a signal that everyone knew by now. Li Tianlan was very clear that no one would know what Wang Tianzong talked about with his grandfather when he went to Lin'an. But after coming back from Lin'an, he took Wang Yuetong away directly, which could explain a lot of problems. There was no problem with Wang Yuetong's departure. But in the eyes of others, with Wang Yuetong's departure, the attitude of the Wang family of Beihai became completely clear. What everyone now knew was not only that Wang Tianzong took Wang Yuetong away, but the deeper meaning of this so-called signal was that the Wang family of Beihai did not welcome Li Tianlan, the heavenly son of Jianghu state. The signal had been sent out. Next, the Wang family of Beihai did not need to do anything. Because it was time for Kunlun City to take action. And when the Wang family of Beihai showed its attitude, some other wait-and-see forces in Jianghu state would also show their corresponding attitudes. And these attitudes were the so-called general trend. The general trend of Jianghu state. The general trend could only go with the flow. As expected. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and said slowly. He did not think of Wang Tianzong's deep meaning, but he had already been mentally prepared for what would happen next. I heard from Commander Ning that there may be some changes in the special warfare system of Jianghu state recently, specifically, Ning Qianqing said. When he mentioned his father, he just called him Commander Ning, stiffly. Li Tianlan interrupted him and said with a smile, I've already heard it from Marshal Dongcheng. As soon as Yuetong left, the matter of the special warfare department should be settled, right? This is not a matter of a short time, but the final result should not be unexpected. This is a systematic reform, and the opinions of the higher-ups are a little chaotic. If I'm not wrong, they should make a pilot first. Ning Qianqing thought of the inside story that Ning Ziyuan intentionally or unintentionally told him, and his tone was a little complicated. Pilot in the southeast? The look of mockery in Li Tianlan's eyes became clearer. Ning Qianqing nodded and said, the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters should be established in a few days, but the headquarters has not been determined yet. Commander Ning said that if there is no accident, the headquarters will be either in Huading or Lin'an. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted and he narrowed his eyes. If the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters was set up in Huading, everyone had nothing to say. It was a municipality with an extremely important status, and the headquarters should be set up here. But it was unusual to set it up in Lin'an. Several provinces in the southeast were rich and powerful, but in terms of status, Jinling was definitely a little higher than Lin'an. The Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters was currently set up in Lin'an. The Li family that reappeared in Jianghu state was now in Lin'an. Sit down. Li Tianlan waved his hand and sat down. He did not speak for a long time. Everyone was waiting for Li Tianlan's reaction. The establishment of the Special Warfare Headquarters was a disaster for any young force that needed to rise quickly to achieve a certain goal, and the East Emperor Palace would be particularly affected. What's the attitude of Mount Shu? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. He did not ask Ning Qianqing about the attitude of the Eastern Theater of Operations, which was the sphere of influence of the Southeast Group. Not to mention whether Ning Ziyuan was willing to do anything for his son, even if he wanted to, he had to listen to Wang Tianzong. He also did not ask Su Chu. Jade Pool and the Dongqing clan were of the same breadth and branches, and the Dongqing clan would definitely stand on his side. As for Mount Shu, Li Tianlan suddenly wanted to know the attitude of Mount Shu. Eldest senior brother has no specific attitude for the time being. Li Badian shook his head. He hesitated and said with a wry smile, we are all on the same side, so I'll say something directly. I guess this secret can't be kept for long. During the Battle of Changdao, didn't you wonder why the leader was third senior brother instead of eldest senior brother? Li Tianlan's heart moved, but he did not speak. Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master of Mount Shu. He was one of the top 10 contemporary experts of Jianghu state, a top expert of the half-step invincible realm. Why didn't he participate in the Battle of Changdao? Li Tianlan's eyes were a little playful. Because at that time, eldest senior brother was trying his best to break through the realm, trying to enter the invincible realm. Li Beidian said with a wry smile, but he failed. Now he is seriously injured, and his realm has fallen from the half-step invincible realm to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. At this time, Mount Shu can only keep silent about this matter. He suddenly looked at Li Tianlan and continued, but eldest senior brother asked me to tell you something. Take a step back, and you will see the world. Li Tianlan's expression changed. He looked at Li Beidian seriously and said softly, I remember something. The three of us happen to be assigned to the same dormitory in the Sky Academy. It's not a coincidence, right? Li Beidian's face froze. Ning Qianqing's expression was also a little unnatural. But now, after seeing Dongqing Wudi, Li Tianlan already knew that Ning Qianqing and him sharing the same dormitory was arranged by the Dongqing clan. As for Li Beidian, Li Tianlan asked softly, was it arranged by Wei Kunlun? Li Beidian hesitated and said with a wry smile, no, it's not a big deal. It's really not a coincidence that we are in the same dormitory. I was entrusted by someone to help you when I can, so that you can become stronger as soon as possible. But it wasn't eldest senior brother who made these arrangements. He didn't know you at that time. It was second senior brother who asked me to appear by your side. Second senior brother, Li Tianlan looked stunned. The other young people were a little confused. Only Yu Donglai showed a look of understanding after a little pause. His eyes lit up. Second senior brother of Mount Shu. To be precise, the so-called second senior brother was not a senior brother, but a senior sister. Yun Qinshi, the phantom sword master. She was also the most mysterious sword master of Mount Shu. A giant of Mount Shu, a woman, and a half-step invincible realm expert. Such an identity was worth gossiping about anywhere. When Li Tianlan was in Chengdao, he heard Deep Dream, the top assassin of Sai City, mention Yun Qinshi. It was said that this phantom sword master had a very bad relationship with Situ Cangyue, the hidden god of Zhongzhou state. They were even incompatible. Because of this, Li Tianlan became more confused. He had thought that Li Beidian was with him because of Wei Kunlun's arrangement, but now Yun Qinshi appeared. Since she had a bad relationship with the Lord of Sai City, why would she help him? Does your second senior brother know me? Li Tianlan couldn't help asking. No, I don't. Li Beidian shook his head. He looked at Li Tianlan with a strange look in his eyes and said in a strange tone, although second senior brother doesn't know you, but Tianlan, you don't really think that your old master has done nothing but guard the border all these years, do you? The old master Li Beidian mentioned was naturally Li Honghe. But the problem was that Li Tianlan knew nothing. And it seemed that Li Beidian knew something. What do you know? Li Tianlan asked directly. In terms of age, I'm a few years older than you. But when the Li family had an accident, I was still young. What could I know? Li Beidian said helplessly, but I heard first senior brother mention old master Li by accident before. I forgot the details, but first senior brother said that in the whole Zhongzhou state, if we say that old fox, no, wily, well, if we say that old man gets stronger, ahem. Anyway, that's what he meant. First senior brother said that in this respect, Senior Li is the real number one person in Zhongzhou state. Li Tianlan felt a little strange. Old fox, wily, that was what Wei Kunlun wanted to express at that time. But his grandfather had been quiet all these years. What was he planning? What was it? Li Tianlan's curiosity was completely aroused. Why did he say that? Li Beidian frowned and shook his head. In his memory, the only time first senior brother mentioned the Li family, he seemed to be a little drunk. He was indeed better at drinking than Wei Kunlun, but if Wei Kunlun drank too much, how could Li Beidian be any better? He could only remember bits and pieces of the conversation from that time. I only remember 4 words. Chapter 278. Everyone present was silent. For the vast majority of young people in Zhongzhou state, the Li family represented the former glory and the current decline. Li Honghe. What kind of person was the former war god of Zhongzhou state, who had been gradually forgotten over the years but reappeared in the eyes of the world after the border war. It was worth everyone's curiosity. After all, no matter how poor the Li family was, Li Honghe was now a peerless expert in the invincible realm. No matter how cruel the dark world was or how rigorous the special warfare system was, gossip among experts was also very popular. However, Li Baitian's revelation stopped there. After the amazing plot, there was nothing else, not even some of his own speculations, which made people feel awkward. If the amazing plot was a revelation, then what was the content of the so-called amazing plot was the real key. Li Baidian only remembered this, so Li Tianlan didn't feel it was appropriate to ask more. "What are your plans?" Li Tianlan suddenly asked after a moment of silence. He actually didn't care much about what Li Baidian said. Perhaps in the eyes of Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master of Mount Shu, Li Honghe was a real scheming old fox. But in Li Tianlan's heart, he was his grandfather, the old man who guarded the last living space of the Li family for 20 years. If there was a so-called amazing plot, how could the Li family be so poor today? He glanced at Li Baidian and Ning Qiansheng, then at Du Hanin and Su Chu. Only then did he find that none of them needed his concern. "What do you mean?" Li Baidian froze for a moment and asked, looking at Li Tianlan. "We all have to plan for our future. East Emperor Palace doesn't seem to have a bright future now." Li Tianlan whispered, "So will East Emperor Palace still exist in the future?" Ning Qiansheng interrupted Li Tianlan and asked. "Of course." Li Tianlan answered without hesitation. This was his only way. Although he was the young governor of Sai City now, even if he became the governor in the future, he couldn't take Sai City for granted and turn it into the Li family. Only East Emperor Palace was his own force. Although the free forces were now about to be controlled by the special warfare divisions of various regions, and although this road was extremely difficult, there was only one way in front of Li Tianlan, and there was no other choice. "As long as the East Emperor Palace is here, I will be here." Ning Qiansheng said calmly, "We were assigned to the same dormitory for other reasons. But we didn't consider anything else when we joined the East Emperor Palace. You are my brother. If you are here and the East Emperor Palace is here, I will definitely be here. Do you think we will withdraw from the East Emperor Palace because of the Special Warfare Department?" Li Baidian laughed and scolded, "Damn it, I'm the Great Void Sword Master. Why should I be afraid of the Special Warfare Department? I came to the Sky Academy to help you. If I quit the East Emperor Palace now, wouldn't it make your road more difficult? I have no plans. The East Emperor Palace is good. I will stay here." "Me too." Su Chu said calmly, "If it weren't for young master, would have died in East Island. I must get my revenge. It's only possible if I'm by your side." Du Hanin's voice was clear and cold, but extremely determined. Li Tianlan's heart gradually calmed down. He looked deeply at the people in front of him, smiled complicatedly, and said softly, "You know what this means. If they stayed in the East Emperor Palace, it not only meant that their future was full of difficulties, but it also meant that the forces behind them had expressed a certain degree of support for Li Tianlan. If the East Emperor Palace wanted to rise against the trend, it would definitely fight with Kunlun City, the Wang family of Beihai, and the Prince Group in the future. When it was a life-and-death battle, this kind of support would become strength, but it might also become implicative. Don't worry so much. Ning Qiansheng said blandly, "Who knows what will happen in the future? Even if something really happens, it's not us who make the choice. Because staying in the East Emperor Palace is our choice." He looked at Li Tianlan and said, "What about you? What's your choice? What kind of path is the East Emperor Palace going to take? Integrate into the new system, or continue to be a free force?" Integrating into the new system would naturally rise along with the current level of the East Emperor Palace. Now the East Emperor Palace was a division-level unit. After the reform of the special warfare system, the level issue might also be reformed. Synchronized with the military, the East Emperor Palace would become a battalion or a deputy regiment level, and then climb up step by step. The East Emperor Palace might become a new Special Operations Bureau, and then it might become a new special warfare headquarters. But in the process, the East Emperor Palace might be broken up and become a name. After all, integrating into the new system meant accepting the direct leadership of the local Special Operations Bureau, the Special Warfare Headquarters, and even Kunlun City. If the higher-ups transferred Li Tianlan out of the so-called East Emperor Palace, Li Tianlan would have no way at all. Continue to be a free force? The East Emperor Palace would exist intact, and it seemed to have more opportunities for development. But it would also be controlled by the local Special Operations Bureau. No one could say what kind of scale it could develop in this way. Neither of these two paths was easy to take. Li Tianlan was the founder of the East Emperor Palace. When Ning Qiansheng, Li Beidian, and the others decided to stay, Li Tianlan must plan the future of the East Emperor Palace. I haven't decided yet. Li Tianlan shook his head. There's still time. Li Beidian said, the East Emperor Palace can't graduate in advance. It's better to maintain the status quo for the next 3 years. But, we have to make plans in advance. It doesn't make sense. Li Tianlan said softly, the general trend is like a chessboard. In Zhongzhou State, Gu Xingyun and Wang Tianzong are all chess players, and we are just chess pieces on the chessboard. No matter how good our plans are, we can't escape the fate of being controlled at will. It doesn't matter which path we take now, because they can easily imprison our upward space. So any plans are meaningless. So, Li Beidian raised his eyebrows. Become stronger. Li Tianlan's tone was straightforward. He reached out and flicked his fingers gently. In silence, a weak sword intent rose out of thin air. The sword intent was so weak, so small, and so illusory. It was a sword intent that was not worthy of anyone's attention. But Li Beidian's pupils contracted in an instant. He couldn't stop thinking about that moment just now. The sword intent appeared and disappeared. It was not a majestic and sharp sword intent, but it had a quality that made him tremble. I've started over. Li Tianlan said softly. Everyone noticed the moment the sword intent appeared. Yu Donglai, who had been silent, was the most excited. He suddenly stood up and took 2 steps. He looked at Li Tianlan and said, what realm are you in now? No realm. Li Tianlan said softly, it's enough to have sword intent. He used to stand at a very high place. For him now, there was only one realm in martial arts. That was the invincible realm. And he was only on the way to the invincible realm. His road had just begun. Li Tianlan's eyes were focused and calm. His future might be filled with thorns, but his martial path was already a smooth one. Go back to the Sky Academy. Li Tianlan looked at Ning Qiansheng and the others and said softly, I know that you guys don't need to attend classes in the Sky Academy anymore. I'm not here, and there's no point in fighting for credits. But since you've entered the school, you have to learn something. The significance of the existence of the Special Warfare Academy is not absolute strength, but their ultimate specialties in various fields. No matter which path the East Emperor Palace takes in the future, we need sufficient strength and absolute merits. He paused, glanced at everyone in sight, and said softly, so for the next period of time, the East Emperor Palace will be handed over to you. What about you? Ning Qiansheng asked subconsciously. Me, Li Tianlan smiled. The general trend was like a game of chess. Now he couldn't afford to play this game of chess, nor was he willing to be a chess piece. So he simply stopped playing and jumped out of the chessboard. I'm going out for a walk. He said softly. Chapter 279. Leaving was not an escape, but the best choice now. Li Tianlan knew very well that he needed to let it go. He couldn't let it go, so why not let it go for the time being? The general trend was surging and magnificent. Li Tianlan thought that he couldn't afford to play now. Instead of struggling to move forward, it was better to take a step back. Just like the words that Nirvana Sword Master of Mount Shu asked Li Beidian to tell him. Take a step back and you will see the world. There were too many seemingly tragic failures and sad songs, but in the end, they all died because of untimely persistence. Li Tianlan decided to take a step back. Retreat out of the general trend, let go of fetters, grievances, the Li family, and even Qin Weibai. Pursue the purest sword intent with the most dedicated mind. The moment he destroyed his wind and thunder veins, he had already seen his path clearly. The path of a new beginning. No one asked Li Tianlan where he wanted to go. Only Yu Donglai whispered, "When are you going to leave?" "Now." Li Tianlan's voice was as light as the clouds in the sky, with a sense of illusion that would disappear at any time. He could leave the night Wang Yuetong left. If he hadn't waited for Li Beidian and others to come back, he would have been on the way now. He stood up, looked at the young faces around him that represented infinite potential, and whispered, "East Emperor Palace is temporarily in your hands. Young master, I'll go with you." Su Chu stood up, and his thick and resolute face looked extremely determined. He was the first disciple of Jade Pool. He came to the Sky Academy this time because Bai Qingxian asked him to follow Li Tianlan. After the Battle of Chengdao, Su Chu's strength broke through again, and he almost entered the thunder-shocking realm. It was really unnecessary to stay in the Sky Academy, and it was not his task. Li Tianlan shook his head and said with a chuckle, "This is my own path. You stay and guard my foundation for me." Su Chu wanted to say something but stopped. Li Tianlan had already turned his eyes to Ning Qiansheng and Li Beidian. "Thank you," he said seriously. "We are brothers." Ning Qiansheng's tone was as calm as plain water, without any ups and downs. Li Tianlan nodded with a smile. Nothing else mattered. "We are brothers. So we will not leave." This sentence could already represent everything. Li Tianlan glanced at Yu Donglai. Yu Donglai nodded and said nothing. He and Li Tianlan didn't need to say much. Nothing needed to be said. He turned around and walked straight out of the door. Her clothes were as white as snow. The sword was as red as blood. No one sent him off. Everyone silently watched Li Tianlan leave and walk out of the East Emperor Palace. The sky outside the window became increasingly gloomy and depressing. Li Tianlan walked past the artificial lake in front of the door and heard a faint sound behind him. His footsteps were met with resistance. The golden retriever, who had been lying by the lake, ran over and bit his trousers gently. Li Tianlan looked at the golden retriever. Wang Yuetong gave him with a strange look. The golden retriever's name was Baby. No matter what it was called, it was still a dog. He squatted down and patted the golden retriever's head. The golden retriever wagged its tail and wanted to lick Li Tianlan's hand happily. "Go play." Li Tianlan pointed to the lake behind him. The golden retriever whimpered and circled around him. During Li Tianlan's time in the East Emperor Palace, whether he was sitting in a daze in front of the door or walking in the East Emperor Palace, he would be accompanied by this golden retriever most of the time. "Do you want to go with me?" Li Tianlan asked. Dogs were intelligent. The golden retriever immediately stopped circling and rushed up to lick Li Tianlan's face. Li Tianlan hugged it and said with a smile, "Well, with you and the sword, this journey is not lonely." The clouds were getting lower and lower. Heavy rain was about to fall from the sky. A black Volkswagen drove unhurriedly into a high-end community in the center of Huading under the gloomy sky. The car stopped in front of a residential building on the edge of the community. A thin figure wrapped in a black cloak got out of the car unhurriedly, entered the elevator, and went straight to the 9th floor. 1 unit per floor greatly guaranteed the privacy of the apartment. The man wrapped in a black cloak silently walked out of the elevator and directly entered the luxurious and exquisite home. A young woman of about 26 or 27 years old was sitting in the living room, making tea. The woman's figure was plump and delicate. She wore a close-fitting suit, which fully displayed her extremely beautiful figure. She seemed to have deliberately dressed up and put on light makeup. Her hair was wet from the shower. In the mist gradually rising from the tea, her charming face seemed to become more and more attractive. The man wrapped in a black cloak walked into the living room. The young woman who had been quietly making tea stood up subconsciously and said softly, "Master." The man under the cloak answered in a low voice and asked directly, "What's the matter?" "Gu Hanshan and Gu Fengbo will arrive in Huading tomorrow. He spoke to me on the phone not long ago. 3 days ago, Gu Hanshan successfully broke through to the thunder-shocking realm. This time he may come to Huading to test Li Tianlan's current situation." The woman said softly. Silence. The man under the cloak was silent for a while and then said with a soft smile, "Is this information very important?" He reached out and pinched the woman's chin, admiring the woman's charming but uneasy young face. This was a face that many students of the Sky Academy were very familiar with. Lu Dongyu of the Lu family of Huading. Everyone knew that the Lu family was an important part of the peripheral forces of Kunlun City, but few people knew that now, because of the Imperial Jade Seal, the whole Lu family had completely turned to Li Tianlan. And Li Tianlan would also not know that Lu Dongyu, who was the first to surrender to him when he broke into the Lu family alone that night, had another position. Lu Dongyu had another position. What about the whole Lu family? Lu Dongyu's delicate body trembled slightly, not because of fear, but because her chin was pinched. Her whole face showed a kind of emotional flush and excitement. "I think the master must be very worried about the safety of young Governor Li, so he reported this information to you," Lu Dongyu said in a trembling voice. "Oh." The man in the cloak said with a little playfulness, "So you know my identity?" "I recognized the master when I was in Changdao." Lu Dongyu's voice trembled more and more seductively. "Military. Military counselor." Military counselor was silent for a while. After a long while, he let go of Lu Dongyu and sat directly on the sofa. Lu Dongyu knelt in front of military counselor with her charming eyes, trembling to untie his belt. "Kunlun City," military counselor murmured to himself and mocked, "You really don't give up your evil intentions." Lu Dongyu did not speak, and her charming face with light makeup was directly lowered. "I see." Military counselor gently stroked Lu Dongyu's hair and said indifferently, "Since you know my identity, then you must understand that from today on, I am not your master. Tianlan is." Lu Dongyu's movement paused, and then she tried harder to move up and down. "Your skills are getting better and better. No wonder Gu Hanshan likes you." Military counselor said with a chuckle and then said, "In addition, please tell your grandfather that what I said to you is equally valid for the whole Lu family. He's getting old, and I'm afraid he's confused. How dare he ask me to rob Tianlan's Imperial Jade Seal? I'm afraid he's delusional. Grandfather doesn't know your identity, Your Excellency." Lu Dongyu raised her head, and her eyes were blurred. Military counselor pressed Lu Dongyu's head down and said indifferently, "It doesn't matter. A dog must be a likable dog. Only when it is loyal can it be likable. His messy thoughts can be put away. From today on, there is only one master of your Lu family, not me, but Li Tianlan." Lu Dongyu nodded, but it brought military counselor a more comfortable experience. Military counselor turned to look out of the window. Under the cloak, his eyes were deep and calm. No matter what happened in the future, Samsara Palace would not separate from Li Tianlan. But Li Tianlan's actions against the Lu family, military counselor suddenly had a headache. The plan was messed up after all, but fortunately, there was still time to repair it. He looked at the young woman who knelt at his feet and fawned on him, thinking that it was not a big problem to let the Lu family come out from the dark. Li Tianlan did not go to the Sky Academy, but asked Tribulation to go to a park near the Sky Academy. Tribulation, who was pale, arrived as scheduled. Looking at the long sword on Li Tianlan's back and the golden retriever lying at his feet, he raised his eyebrows slightly and seemed puzzled. "How is Martial Uncle's injury?" Li Tianlan looked at Tribulation and asked straightforwardly without any nonsense. Tribulation narrowed his eyes and was silent for a while. Then he laughed at himself and said, "Not very optimistic. Too much of a burden on your body." Li Tianlan frowned. He was the young governor of Sai City. If he became successful in the future, he could not directly turn Sai City into the Li family. But it did not mean that Sai City was not important to him. At least until now, Sai City was still his most reliable protection. The state of tribulation and Situ Tsangyue was most directly related to Li Tianlan's interests and the foundation of his future survival. He took out the imperial jade seal that he had prepared and handed it to Tribulation. He said softly, "This thing should play a role, but how to use it, Martial Uncle needs to study it yourself. To be honest, although I came back to life with luck, I am not very clear about the function of this thing." Tribulation took the imperial jade seal and glanced at it. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Martial arts stone? It's the imperial jade seal," Li Tianlan explained. Tribulation's breathing suddenly became heavy. He knew about the imperial jade seal, but the ancient jade in front of him was the most precious martial arts stone for martial artists. If he could get it in advance, how could his breakthrough be like this? "Thank you." Tribulation was silent for a while. Then he held the imperial jade seal tightly in his hand and said seriously, "It's good that it's useful to Martial Uncle." Li Tianlan smiled and waved his hand. "I'm going to leave Huading for a walk. I'm afraid that I won't be able to see Martial Uncle for a while, so I came to say goodbye to you." Tribulation glanced at Li Tianlan and frowned. "Temporarily?" Before Li Tianlan could speak, he nodded again and said, "It's good to temporarily take a step back. The special warfare system will be established in the southeast region of Zhongzhou State, and the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters will be established." Li Tianlan nodded and asked subconsciously, "Who's minister?" Although he knew it was unlikely to be Tribulation, he still hoped to hear a different answer. But the answer Tribulation gave was in line with the norm. "If I'm not mistaken, it should be Zhang Qi." Zhang Qi, the director of Wuxia Special Operations Bureau. Wuxia was the core territory of the Southeast Group. Zhang Qi's strength was higher than that of the directors of the Special Operations Bureau around him. He was a real superior of the half-step invincible realm. For him to take this position, he had enough strength and experience. But, the Southeast Group would get the result of this pilot. Was the Wang family of Beihai so eager to stand on the front line against him? "He's just a transitional figure." Tribulation said, "The Southeast Group got this position. It won't take long for them to trade with Kunlun City. But no matter how they trade, it's hard for us to get it. It's good to temporarily take a step back." Li Tianlan nodded, stood up and said, "After I leave, if Martial Uncle is still in Huading, please take care of East Emperor Palace if there are any problems in the future." "Don't worry." Tribulation nodded and said, "Even if I leave, Sai City will send someone else to take care of it." He looked at Li Tianlan and asked directly, "Where are you going?" "I haven't decided yet." Li Tianlan shook his head and said, "Just walk around, all the way south or north. Maybe one day I'll go directly to Mount Taibai." A stiff smile appeared on Tribulation's pale face. "If you need it, go there directly. Sai City will arrange everything for you." Li Tianlan nodded and turned to leave. The golden retriever followed behind him happily. He passed the grass and the flower beds. Standing at the gate of the park, Li Tianlan turned back and looked back. Tribulation still stayed where he was, watching him quietly. Li Tianlan waved his hand, turned around, and walked away. Thunder sounded in the air. The autumn rain, which had been brewing for a long time, began to fall. Li Tianlan's figure gradually became blurred in the rain, going farther and farther. A man, a sword, and a dog. Chapter 280. The autumn rain blurred the green water and the Tsang Mountain. The rain continued to fall, lingering in the air. Dark clouds gathered from the north to the south, and the rain kept falling, with frosty coldness and bleakness. Lonely Mountain was the most beautiful in the rain. West Lake was also the most beautiful in the rain. The old man with gray hair, dressed in cotton clothes, was sitting at the junction of mountains and rivers, fishing with a homemade fishing rod. The Mid-Autumn Festival had passed. There was still green on Lonely Mountain, but the withered yellow was gradually spreading. The old man seemed to be sitting between life and death, and his back looked lonely and lonely. The autumn rain was still falling, wetting the Tsang mountain and the green water, which was poignant and beautiful. It was poetic and picturesque. A black umbrella appeared on the mountain road covered with flowers and leaves. The black umbrella was bathed in the rain and walked down the mountain. A woman in simple and plain clothes but with a very beautiful appearance walked behind the old man with an umbrella. The woman's appearance was very beautiful, but there was a kind of vicissitudes and fatigue in her eyes. She was not young, but a little haggard look could not hide the stubbornness between her eyebrows, which was an instinctive persistence. Such a woman was the most beautiful. Even if she was in her twilight years, she was still as beautiful as before. The woman took a step forward and held the umbrella over the old man's head, shielding him from the dense rain. The old man didn't seem to notice it. He just looked at the water attentively and said nothing. The woman was also silent, standing behind the old man with an umbrella, like a statue. There was silence between heaven and earth. Time passed. The fishing rod in the old man's hand trembled uncontrollably with his palm, and then there were ripples on the water surface. The woman behind him looked quietly at the old man's uncontrollably trembling hand. Her eyes were sad, and she couldn't help sighing softly. The old man seemed to notice that there was one more person behind him. He looked at the umbrella above his head, pointed with the other hand, and said with a smile, "It's meaningless. I don't need this thing." He really didn't need it. No matter how heavy the rain was, as long as he wanted, wherever he went, there would be a clear sky. He was fearless of wind and rain, and invincible to all enemies. Just because his name was Li Honghe. "It's meaningless for you to fish here," the woman said softly, "because you can't catch fish at all." Li Honghe didn't mind the woman's tone and said with a smile, "We will have guests later. If I can put the fish I caught on the table, it will be my sincerity. I won't lose anything by trying." "He doesn't like your fish." The woman's tone was crisp and clear. "But the only thing I can satisfy him is fish," Li Honghe said calmly. When the woman heard this, her originally tense expression immediately relaxed a little, but she didn't say anything. No one knew if Li Honghe saw the expression of the woman behind him. He looked at the lake and suddenly said, "You don't like Jianghu State." The woman was silent for a moment, then softly said, "I'm tired, tired." It wasn't that she didn't like it. She used to love it, but she was really tired now. Li Honghe smiled self-deprecatingly and said in a complicated tone, "It's the Li family that let you down. But I can't afford it." "What is letting him down?" The woman said calmly, "It is Jianghu State that failed the Li family." Li Honghe didn't say anything. He was not qualified to say anything about this issue. He was really not qualified. "It seems that I was wrong to let Li Huaqing take Wuxia away," Li Honghe said softly. "Wuxia has now become the new Major General of Spirit Tortoise in Jianghu State. I thought you would be happy. Now I think about it, Xianxia, you will blame me, right?" Li Wuxia, the cold light in the corners of Xianxia's eyes suddenly softened. She was Li Wuxiang's mother. For her, her son was the real everything. He still has a future, and he can help the young master and the Li family. Your Highness made a good arrangement. I'm very grateful, Xianxia said softly. Xianxia said softly. She used to be an extraordinary woman in the special warfare system of Jianghu State, but with the passage of time, this former female general seemed to have lost her edge in the past. What about you? Li Honghe suddenly asked, what do you want? Xianxia looked silent and didn't speak for a long time. I suddenly remembered the motto of the Sky Academy, which I mentioned in person back then. If you want to go to heaven, you must go to hell first. Xianxia, the Li family can give you freedom now. Do you want to go to hell? Li Honghe asked softly. The Li family had never seen heaven whether in its glory or in its decline, but it had seen hell. There was freedom everywhere in hell. If death was freedom, Xianxia smiled and said calmly, I don't want to die. She didn't want to die, nor did she want to face it. Li Honghe nodded and said, then let others die. Leng Xiao is good. Han Xuan is also good. Qingye recommended 2 people. These 2 people were now in Lonely Mountain. They had been with Li Honghe for nearly 20 years. They were loyal and had faced countless open and hidden attacks in the cold rain. Li Honghe nodded and said calmly, "Then let them be. I'll arrange it." Qingye nodded. The drizzling rain was still flying in the air. The wind stopped, and the rain suddenly became heavier. The sky was gloomy, and the mountains gradually filled with a vast expanse of white. It began to fog. The fine white mist drifted between the mountains and rivers, making them hazy. After getting the answer he wanted, Qingye turned and left. A lone boat appeared on the water in the distance. A middle-aged man, who was well known in Jianghu state and appeared on the news broadcast almost every year, stood at the bow of the boat with a dignified appearance. The president of Jianghu state, Li Huaqing. Qingye turned around to look, and his eyes were filled with indifference. The whole lonely mountain seemed to be glorious when the president visited. Li Honghe had said that all he could give Li Huaqing was fish. Now it seemed that he couldn't even give him fish. She turned around and left without saying a word. Li Honghe also stood up and looked at Li Huaqing, who came ashore in front of him. The old man smiled kindly and said softly, "Welcome, President." Li Huaqing, who looked high-spirited but had a serious look in his eyes, waved his hand and said with a smile, "You're too polite, Senior Li. The weather is bad, so you should rest more on the mountain. It doesn't matter if I get caught in the rain occasionally." Li Honghe reached out and pulled Li Honghe ashore. The heat rose around him. With him as the center, the rain within a radius of tens of meters was completely evaporated in an instant. Lonely Mountain is not a barren place, but there are not many resources it can offer. I plan to entertain you by fishing in person, but the weather is too bad, and the fish don't give me face, so I can only simplify everything. Li Honghe said with a smile. Li Huaqing was slightly stunned. Although the other party's tone was calm, he still heard a hint of rejection from the other party's tone. Although he didn't understand the meaning, it seemed to be enough to show Li Honghe's true attitude towards his visit today. Li Huaqing frowned. He didn't want to get to the point too quickly, but Li Honghe's meaning was somewhat clear. He had to tentatively say with a smile, "Everything is fine, Senior Li. What's worth my visit is not only the food." Li Honghe smiled and didn't say much. Li Huaqing's heart sank slightly again. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Li Honghe, who was still fishing beside him. He said softly, "I have something to report to Senior Li. Tianlan left Huading 2 days ago." He said he was going for a walk, but he didn't say where he was going. Li Honghe raised his eyebrows and turned to take a deep look at Li Huaqing. "That's a good step back," he said softly. He knew a series of things in the outside world. Even if he didn't want to know, at this time he was in Lin, and some people with intentions would try to send him information. But in this situation, it was really good for Li Tianlan to take a step back. "It's simply wonderful." Li Huaqing looked sincere and admiring. "Yes." Li Honghe laughed. He went out for a few months. Although he suffered some setbacks, it seems to be a good thing. At least he has matured a little. The future of the Li family ultimately depends on him, not me. Here it came. Li Huaqing's heart tightened, but he remained calm and respectfully said, "But the Li family still belongs to Senior Li, wrong?" Li Honghe said quietly, "The Li family only lives for itself now, so the Li family belongs to each of us. Maybe it will be Tianlan's in the future, but now it's not his or mine." Li Huaqing felt a little bitter at the corner of his mouth. He tried to smile and said, "I understand what you mean and your decision, but Tianlan is still young, and no one knows where he is now. The Li family still needs you to take charge of the overall situation. Don't you understand, Huaqing?" Li Honghe sighed softly. After the border war, the Li family no longer pursues the overall situation, but freedom. "I know your difficulties, but today's Li family is not what it was 20 years ago. Now we need Tianlan to be responsible for the Li family, and I only need to be responsible for my grandson. He did understand Li Huaqing's difficulties. Li Huaqing treated people with generosity, and his actions could be regarded as upright. Since he had been promoted, he had pursued fairness in many sensitive personnel issues, and he did not have too deep a grudge against the major groups. The academics had risen quickly, but its foundation was shallow. Li Huaqing's actions were entirely because he wanted to leave enough living space for the academics after he retired. So from another perspective, the weakness of the academics today had a direct relationship with their shallow foundation and Li Huaqing's style of doing things. But he did not want the academics to be weak all the time. What he hoped was to grasp some things in the dark when he gave up some things on the surface, so as to make up for some shortcomings of the academics' own political structure. For example, the special warfare system. The academics could have expected Li Tianlan's growth. But the cooperation between Gu Xingyun and the Wang family of Beihai forced Li Huaqing to speed up his plan. The special warfare system needed experts. The Li family was Li Huaqing's only choice now. Li Honghe actually didn't know what Li Huaqing was going to do with the Li family, and he didn't want to know. As he said, the only thing he could give Li Huaqing was this fish that he didn't know whether he could take the bait or not. At least, he would no longer carry the Li family to go to the mountains of knives and seas of fire under the encouragement of the so-called overall situation. That was Li Tianlan's business. Your grandson? Li Huaqing narrowed his eyes and suddenly asked in a playful tone. Li Honghe was a little confused. Old Li, I've inadvertently found out about some things. Today, I've come here to verify it. Li Huaqing asked softly, do you know Secretary Bai Qingqian? The girl of the Bai family? Yes. Li Honghe nodded. Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian were recognized as talented and beautiful in the eyes of countless people. They loved each other very much, but I don't know why their relationship became very bad later. I accidentally learned that all this should have started when Bai Qingqian gave birth to Dongqing Rushi. Dongqing Rushi can't be the reason why Bai Qingqian turned against the Dongqing clan. Then what on earth caused Bai Qingqian to break up with the Dongqing clan? Why? Li Honghe asked quietly. Because of maternal love. Li Huaqing stared at Li Honghe. After what happened that year, I heard that Senior Li just had a granddaughter who died young. I didn't know you had a grandson. On the contrary, we all ignored Dongqing Rushi, who was born at the same time as Tianlan. Senior Li, do you really have a grandson? Bai Qingqian is now in Guangdong. To be honest, that's where I used to work, so I still have some influence in Guangdong. Li Huaqing said slowly, a few months ago, when the news of Tianlan's death reached Zhongzhou State, Dongqing Wudi went to Guangdong as soon as possible. He stayed there for 3 days in a row, but he didn't see Bai Qingqian. Later, he seemed to have seen her, and it was said that he was slapped. When I heard the news, I vaguely sorted out some clues and roughly guessed why Bai Qingqian turned against the Dongqing clan. There's no other reason that we can't see. Li Huaqing said softly, it's because of the child. Bai Qingqian's hatred for the Dongqing clan is just because she is a mother who lost her child. Dongqing Rushi is not Bai Qingqian's daughter. Li Tianlan is the son of Bai Qingqian and Dongqing Wudi. Senior Li, Dongqing Rushi is your granddaughter. Am I right? No. Li Honghe smiled. His expression didn't change at all. There was only calmness and naturalness. I really have nothing to do with Dongqing Rushi. He said softly. His tone was not forced naturalness at all. Li Huaqing's speculation was very reasonable. But whether he believed it or not. Chapter 281. Autumn was about to pass. Early winter was coming. Heaven Capital welcomed the first snow of the year. Snowflakes were falling in the late night and the morning. They were neither too big nor too small, but they seemed to be never-ending. The cold east wind roared in every corner of Changdao. The snow fell silently, and the world was white. The airport of Heaven Capital was still in operation. Daybreak, who entered the airport through the VIP passage, got out of the car and looked up at the flying snow in the air with soft eyes. He was dressed in white. The ground was covered with snow. It was a very cold but warm picture. The planes in the airport took off and landed with scenes of gathering and dispersing. The pickup bus shuttled back and forth. Daybreak, dressed in white, stood quietly like a statue. 11:00 in the morning. The wind and snow were stronger. A loud roar sounded in the air. A silver-gray private plane slowly landed on the runway that had just been cleared. Daybreak, who was covered with snow, moved and took a step forward. A cold and dreamy young figure slowly walked down the gangway. The woman wore a black coat and faced the wind and snow of Heaven Capital without any makeup. She was delicate and indifferent. She was colder than the cold wind. She was more beautiful than the falling snow. Daybreak's eyes were in a trance. Then he smiled and said softly, "Boss Qin, welcome to Heaven Capital." Heaven Capital is a good name. Qin Weibai walked down the gangway and said softly as her high heels stepped on the snow. Daybreak smiled without saying a word. He reached out and made a "please" gesture. Flaming Fire, who was behind Qin Weibai, had already walked a few steps forward and opened the door for her. Qin Weibai got into the car. The black car was driving in the snow-covered Heaven Capital. Qin Weibai looked at the falling snow outside the window and suddenly said, "How is your highness doing recently?" "I'm in a good mood. I've been busy with the internal affairs of East Island recently. There are too many things to do, so I can't come to pick you up in person." Daybreak said with a polite smile, "But your highness has already held a banquet to welcome Boss Qin in Wangtian Pavilion." Like Heaven Capital, Sky-Reaching Pavilion was also a new name. It was located in the center of Heaven Capital and used to be a hotel. It could be said to be the tallest building in Heaven Capital. After the appearance of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, Changdao was renamed Heaven Capital. The tallest hotel in Changdao became the temporary headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital and was renamed Sky-Reaching Pavilion. Deity of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, who ranked second on the divine list, now lived on the top floor of Sky-Reaching Pavilion. Qin Weibai said nothing more. She kept staring out of the window. She looked tired and weak. The car drove through the silent atmosphere, all the way to Wangtian Pavilion. Daybreak didn't get off the car. He just turned his head apologetically and said softly, "Boss Qin, I'm sorry. I have something to deal with. His Highness is waiting for you upstairs. I'll arrange someone to take you upstairs." Qin Weibai nodded noncommittally and got out of the car with Flaming Fire. The Daybreak car turned around and rushed out at a faster speed than when it came, heading straight for the airport again. The engine roared in the snowstorm. Daybreak's hand holding the steering wheel trembled slightly. He was extremely beautiful. His handsome face, which was somewhat devilishly handsome, seemed to have completely soared. Even his eyes were no longer cold and gloomy, but sharp and bright. The car rushed straight to the airport at a speed that was almost flying. A passenger plane flying from overseas to Heaven Capital had landed at the airport 20 minutes ago. Two middle-aged men, who looked extremely simple, were standing at the pickup gate. The two of them were dressed in plain cloth clothes and cloth shoes. Overall, they gave off a sense of dullness that was incompatible with Heaven Capital. However, their expressions were still calm. Seeing that no one came to pick them up, they were not in a hurry. They just stood there silently. Daybreak rushed into the airport pickup hall. He immediately found the two plain men, who were being stared at by all kinds of gazes. This was the first time they met after many years. Daybreak's body was stiff on the spot. He was trembling with excitement, but he did not dare to go forward for a while. The two middle-aged men, who were waiting silently, also noticed Daybreak's handsome and enchanting face at the first time. They didn't know this face. But the look in his eyes was somewhat familiar. The two of them frowned. Daybreak had walked over quickly and hugged the two of them tightly. "Welcome." He tried to calm himself down, but the hands holding the two of them were getting closer and closer. "Welcome back, brother." Skyview Pavilion was 68 stories high, shaped like a pyramid. It used to be the most distinctive building in Heaven Capital, and now it had become the most powerful building in Heaven Capital. An elite of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital respectfully led Qin Weibai and Flaming Fire into the elevator. The elevator stopped on the 66th floor. There were no elevators on the upper 2 floors, but spiral stairs. Anyone who arrived here had to walk up. The elite of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital did not move forward, but bowed and made a gesture of invitation to Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai looked around. Skyview Pavilion on the 66th floor was surrounded by glass. The glass was hard, stable, and transparent. Standing in any corner on the 66th floor, one could enjoy the beautiful scenery of the entire Heaven Capital from a high vantage point. It was snowing in Heaven Capital. The snow fell from above. Standing on a high vantage point and looking at the fluttering snowflakes, Qin Weibai suddenly felt a little lonely. This was a natural emotion when standing on a high vantage point. It was lonely at the top. Qin Weibai stopped for a moment and then stepped on the stairs to go up. The scenery here was beautiful. This place was very high. But she didn't like it when someone stood higher than her. The spiral stairs were higher. Stepping up was like climbing a ladder to heaven. Qin Weibai took Flaming Fire step by step and finally climbed to the 68th floor. Because of the structure, the 68th floor was smaller than the lower floor, but it was more exquisite. There was only a crystal tea table in the whole space, surrounded by a carpet, and there was nothing else. It was so simple, and it seemed to prove that the owner of this place was extremely rich and powerful. A man in casual clothes stood in front of the French window with his back to Qin Weibai, motionless and admiring the snow outside the window. Qin Weibai looked at the back in front of her calmly. Flaming Fire, who was beside her, turned her head after a glance. She was the super master of Samsara, a high-end combat force in the dark world. But every time she saw deity, Flaming Fire was afraid. It was an instinctive fear. The other party was so ordinary, but he stood there so real. He looked inconspicuous, but people could not help but ignore everything around him. Real. It was hard for Flaming Fire to describe this temperament. But now deity stood there, ordinary, but real, which made her subconsciously ignore the 2 men standing on both sides of him. 2 men who should never be ignored in East Island. Luxia Xianxia, the master of Jifeng Sword Training School. Tianhai Wuji, the master of Wuji Palace. The 2 great grandmasters of East Island were romantic, but at this time, standing beside the ordinary and real deity, they were like 2 statues. Flaming Fire's scalp was a little numb, and the fear in her heart almost showed on her face involuntarily. Qin Weibai stepped forward. She walked past the blanket beside the tea table. Her high-heeled shoes stepped on the wooden floor, making a crisp sound. Deity turned around, and there was an ordinary and easygoing smile in the corner of his eyes. The heater on the top floor was turned on. Qin Weibai unbuttoned her coat and handed it to Flaming Fire. Flaming Fire took the coat and put it in her hand, and her heart gradually calmed down. Weibai pays respect to your highness. Qin Weibai slightly bowed and said in a light tone. Under the coat, Qin Weibai wore a dark blue embroidered cheongsam. The cheongsam fit her well, and it set off her snow-white calves. Elegant, reserved, cold, and graceful. What was just right was perfection. Deity looked at Qin Weibai with undisguised appreciation in his eyes. For most of his life, he had seen too many so-called beauties, but compared with Qin Weibai in front of him, most of them were mediocre. She was fairy-like and peerless. She was indeed a perfect woman who could topple a country. The fire in the eyes of Tianhai Wuji, the master of Wuji Palace, flashed away. Even Luxia Xianxia, who was known as the Sword Sage, flashed a trace of fire in his eyes. You go down. Deity waved his hand and casually gave an order. Luxia Xianxia and Tianhai Wuji froze at the same time. After a moment of silence, the 2 went downstairs directly without saying a word. Your Highness is really domineering. Qin Weibai chuckled, and it was hard to tell whether her tone was sarcasm or appreciation. Deity glanced at her with a smile and said slowly, "You know the inside story, so why are you sarcastic to me?" Qin Weibai smiled and said no more. The dark world had calmed down now, but there was drama in all countries. It was the reform of the special warfare system in Jianghu state. In East Island, it was the collision between the rising purgatory of Heaven Capital, Wuxia Palace, and Jifeng Sword Training School. Deity was now the only giant in the special warfare system of East Island, and all sides recognized his status. But Wuxia Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School were not willing to let Deity take away too much of their interests. The two were loyal to the Mikado. As long as they did not violate the rules, 9 out of 10 of the orders of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital were obeying them on the surface but secretly disobeying them. Now the 3 invincible realm experts of East Island were fighting openly and secretly. The reason why Luxia Xianxia and Tianhai Wuji could retreat without resistance didn't mean that they really submitted to the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. They just followed the rules on the surface. The Purgatory of Heaven Capital is developing very fast in East Island. It accepted the team of Liuhua Palace and can reach such a scale in a short time. Your Highness deserves the congratulations of Samsara Palace. Qin Weibai said softly. It's developing well. Deity nodded, turned around, reached out his hand, and pointed at Heaven Capital outside the window. How about my country? Qin Weibai looked at the snow outside the window. After a moment of silence, she said lightly, Your Highness's country is falling snow. It's sad but not magnificent. She paused and said with a smile, but it seems that Your Highness is very satisfied with the current situation. Of course I'm not satisfied. Deity turned around calmly. If I were satisfied, I wouldn't have let you appear here today. Your Highness still has ambitions? Qin Weibai asked softly. Jianghu State. Deity was silent for a long time before he slowly spat out 2 words. His eyes were a little cold. He came from Jianghu State. But he was abandoned by Jianghu State like a wild dog. How humiliating was that? No matter how glorious the Purgatory of Heaven Capital was, it couldn't spread its tentacles to Jianghu State, and he couldn't let it go. The Wang family of Beihai is very strong. Kunlun City is also very strong. Qin Weibai said with a smile. Deity nodded frankly and acknowledged this fact. He looked at Qin Weibai and said seriously, So, you don't think there's a chance? There is a chance. But it's not a good opportunity now. Qin Weibai looked at the plain white outside the window, and her tone was calm and composed. This woman, who was less than 25 years old this year, stood in front of Deity, one of the strongest in the dark world. She participated in the general trend, promoted the general trend, and planned the general trend, but she didn't feel the slightest bit out of place. What was I doing when I was 24 or 25 years old? Deity thought silently. When he was 24 or 25 years old, he was still busy making progress in the thunder-shocking realm. He shook his head in self-mockery. Thinking of the recent situation in Jianghu State, he said with a smile, What do you think of the recent changes in Jianghu State? Qin Weibai was silent for a moment and said, The internal problems of the Wang family of Beihai can't be suppressed anymore. Are you sure? Deity's eyes narrowed. This is an inevitable process and law. The Wang family of Beihai is the same as the Li family in the past. They will always come to a period where they have to seek change. If they succeed, they will have a bright future. If they fail, they will be doomed eternally. The Wang family of Beihai has experienced this period. Now it's just another reincarnation. Qin Weibai said softly, but this time it's different. When the Wang family of Beihai goes through this period, there will be no Li family around to shelter them from the wind and rain. On the contrary, they have Kunlun City around them. They asked for it. Deity's tone was cold and mocking. My speculation is the same as yours. Zhang Qi became the first minister of the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters. Even if Kunlun City gives him a place to enter the decision-making committee, it will not be for nothing. Maybe it's a bait. Zhang Qi is the confidant of Wu Yue, isn't he? That person is a big favorite in the next session. If everything goes well, 5 or 6 years later. Is that time the good opportunity you mentioned? Qin Weibai shook her head. Maybe, maybe not. Your Highness, don't underestimate Wang Tianzong. You should know him better than I do. He must also know the meaning of Zhang Qi's promotion. But he let everything go. Maybe he has long been prepared. No preparation is omnipotent. Deity was silent for a while and said indifferently, wasn't the Li family prepared in the past? If the Li family hadn't been prepared, maybe they wouldn't even have the chance to stay dormant now. Qin Weibai said indifferently, Your Highness, if you want the purgatory of heaven capital to enter Zhongzhou state, the Samsara Palace can help you. But now the Samsara Palace needs your help. This is part of our cooperation. At least in the matter of you entering Zhongzhou state, a strong samsara is good for you. I think it's enough now. Deity said with a smile, the purgatory of heaven capital can barely block the Wang family of Beihai now. The Samsara Palace can block Kunlun City. Gu Xingyun is no match for the palace master. And the purgatory of heaven capital will continue to develop. He didn't want to continue. Because Qin Weibai was looking at him. It was a pair of eyes as bright as the Milky Way. With a smile, she was quiet. But under such a gaze, Deity felt like an idiot. First, I believe you can block Wang Tianzong. But can the purgatory of heaven capital block the Wang family of Beihai? Even if it's barely, it's also a joke. Second, the palace master defeated Gu Xingyun unexpectedly that day. If we fight to the death again, I don't know why your highness has so much confidence in the palace master. Third, she looked at Deity and finally stopped hiding her emotions. She said coldly, who told you that Gu Xingyun is the strongest in Kunlun City? Your highness, do you really think I'm an idiot? Deity narrowed his eyes. His ordinary face suddenly looked extremely sharp and gloomy. You really know a lot. He looked at Qin Weibai and said in a meaningful tone. I know everything. Qin Weibai's eyes were in a trance. She said softly, Your Highness, cooperation requires sincerity. You're very strong, but your current ambition might completely destroy you. Deity laughed and said noncommittally, What does the Samsara Palace want? The foundation. Qin Weibai said, The Samsara Palace has its own foundation. Just like the purgatory of heaven capital in heaven capital. Deity was not surprised by the answer. He nodded. Do you have a goal? Where is it? Snow Country. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.